Members, we've got the live feed on now, so we're going to start the meeting. And obviously the first thing I say is good evening, members. Good evening, members, and members of the public in the gallery and online, if anybody is, and the members of the press attending this full council meeting of BCP Council, 12th of September 2023. So welcome everybody. Lovely to see so many people. I'm Councillor Leslie Dedman and Chairman of BCP, so I will chair this meeting tonight, and I'm supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor Simon Bull. We have to set out the housekeeping arrangements for this meeting. As I said, our live feed is on and it's being recorded for the Council for live and subsequent broadcast for a minimum of 6 months on the website. In order to ensure this meeting is managed effectively, we've got a few ground rules which I think I say every time, but I'll have to say them again. When you wish to speak, raise your hand clearly to indicate. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there's any dissension. If a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands. If a recorded vote is requested, which, as we know, has to have support from a quarter of the members present, that is done by names around the hall. Members, you're very welcome to come in and out of the meeting, but can you indicate that you are leaving? And obviously, only for urgent things. And to that end, in accordance with the Constitution, we're going to allow for a comfort break as appropriate. We had been doing it after every 2 hours, but I think we'll see how we're going this evening. And the last little rule, points of order raised should state the applicable constitutional provision. So that means you've got to have the number in the Constitution. So I'm sure you've all looked those up and you know them by heart. And obviously I'm going to assume that all the councillors uphold the highest standards of conduct during our meeting, and we will all treat each other with courtesy and consideration. I'm going to move on now to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. I'm going to turn to the Acting Chief Executive to read out the apologies for this meeting. Acting Chief Executive.
Thank you. And we have apologies from Councillor Cameron Adams, Councillor Sue Atkinhead, Councillor Julie Bagwell, Councillor Jude Sputt, Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown, Councillor Brian Castle, Councillor Michelle Dower, Councillor George Farquhar, Councillor Jamie Martin and Councillor Judy Richardson.
Right, thank you very much. I'm so sorry, Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Chris Matthews has asked me to pass on his apologies too.
Right. Was that the same one?
No, it wasn't, Chair. Councillor Rachel Maidment has just told me that she's not well enough to attend this evening.
Right, thank you. Yes?
And Councillor Miles has been called away to an urgent resident matter but hopes to join later. Thank you.
Well, in any other council I would wonder if we were quorate, but obviously there's so many of us that naturally we are. Thank you. And I hope everybody who has been called away, I know some people are having a really rough time, so very sympathetic to them. Item 2, declarations of interest. Acting Chief Executive, can you report on the declarations of interest if received?
So I haven't had any. Sorry. None received. If any members required to make a declaration of interest, they should follow the flow chart that they'll see on the agenda, but I've got an indication.
Thank you. I'd just like to declare an interest in item number 7 in relation to the Waitrose car park, in which case I will not be proposing that sale and I will be leaving the chamber while that goes on and then returning immediately afterwards. Thank
you. Councillor Tarling, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a similar declaration of interest in the Waitrose car park, as I'm a Christchurch Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have the same declaration as a member of Christchurch Town Council.
And Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm also a member of Christchurch Town Council, so I'll be leaving at item 7. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Can I just declare a non-interest? I used to be a member of Christchurch Town Council, and now I'm not. So, there we go. Right, that was agenda item 2. I think that's everybody's declaration. Nobody else? Thank you, Acting Chief Executive. Now, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we've all had the minutes. I'm sure we've all perused them. I think anything that has been wrong has been reported to Democratic Services for alterations of spelling and what have you. So do we agree to confirm the minutes of the Council? It was 11th of July, which is quite a while ago. Is there any dissension? Right, so I'm taking that as agreed. Can you all shout agreed? Thank you. Item 4. Yes, item 4. I'm a bit concerned about this item because I know that some members may not see the reason behind Chairman's announcements by myself or the Vice Chairman. And so I want to just point out quickly that to have a chair of the council or the mayors of the 3 towns or the vice chairman present not only endorses the charity and the event, but it also ensures more knowledge and publicity, not only for the event when we announce it at full council, but with the councillors, because some of the things that I've been to are in various people's wards. And for example, one of them concerned Ukraine, and several councillors were there, and I was very pleased to see them. So that's why these mentions are important. They're an indication of our community's interests. So, in this spirit, I first note that I went to the Manoside Academy Year 6 graduation ceremony, which was really, really cheering. All the young people participated in one way or another. They all read out something, and they were all really looking forward to the next step in their education journey. Now, the next one was a bit more difficult. I judged bike night on Poole Quay. Now, as you know, I'm a keen biker. No, forget that, I'm not. But I thought the way to judge it was not to go for the more shiny one. So I went for the oldest bike because I thought that that would help people be sustainable. It was the oldest bike probably in the county. Then on the 2nd of August, that was Cushty Box Roma Holocaust Day Memorial. That was in Kingston Lacey. Very moving event. The Holocaust affected so many people, not only the people that we always remember, naturally. And it was so moving, poetry and readings. And then on the 15th of August, it was Burma Star Remembrance Day. That was in Poole Park. And clearly veterans, many have passed on. I think there was one veteran there who was very, very, very fragile. But their families attended, and they gave thanks for their return and a prayer for those who were lost in that conflict. 19th of August was the Igbo community in Dorset's Yam Festival. That was really well attended, full of singing, dancing, Nigerian food. I was going to put drink, but I'm not mentioning that bit. And of course, a celebration yams, and it was an absolutely fascinating afternoon. And then, the next weekend was the commemoration of Ukraine Independence Day, which was held in Redhill Park. We had a lot of councillors there, and also the MP. And it was a day of mixed feelings, because we all had great fun. There was dancing, singing, it rained, but never mind. But I don't think any of us forgot that the refugees' fathers, brothers, sons, uncles could have been, and maybe were, dying on the battlefield. And that made it slightly sombre at some points. Right, next one was something I always attend, whether or not as a local government representative, annual service of remembrance with FONFA, which is Friends of New Forest Airfields. Now, I know we're not in the New Forest, some of us nearly are, but these airfields naturally include a lot in our area, such as, for example, Herne. And I went with Councillor Martin, who's a trustee of this very interesting museum, which I heartily recommend you go to. And it was well attended. Representatives of foreign air forces who flew in this area in the war are always in attendance. And so that was a really worthwhile visit. And it almost leads on. I was trying to think of a way to segue into this, but it doesn't really work. But the air show does almost work. It was full of events. Official opening Thursday, a trip on Friday on the patrol boat, where we watched the display from the bay. And I felt it was a very, very nice trip, and I wasn't seasick. So then we had Beating the Retreat, absolutely jammed. The gardens were full. Tigers parachute display team, full and appreciative crowd. And I just want to say that in order to get the mayors, chairman, vice chairs, deputy mayors, high sheriff and the Lord Lieutenant there, that was a lot of work for our civic team, and they were all wonderful. We were all where we were supposed to be when we were supposed to be, and that was quite a lot of organisation. Next one was an interview with Hope FM, which I hope everybody missed, because although there's a quiz, I must say, I didn't really know that, but there's a quiz when you go on Hope FM, and I did beat Councillor Trent, but not by much. And if Councillor Trent reveals how little he got, I shall be very, very upset. And then Saturday, 9th of September at 9 a.m, so that was the 9th of the 9th of the 9th, we raised the flag and held a service of thanksgiving with the canon of the Priory Church of Christchurch for the emergency services. And you just look around at them, a lot attended. What would we do without them? It was very, very worthwhile. It's quite a new day to mark, but it's well worth it. And many of the representatives were actually on call as they came. Right, so I hope members have seen from these few notes that our council does have an important place in our community, and it is valued when one of us turns up. Vice Chairman, anything to add on your...
There was just two events that I stood in for you, Chair. First was Beating the Retreat, which I attended on the second evening of the air show and took the salute from the band of His Majesty's Royal Marines Portsmouth. And this Sunday, just gone, I attended the UK Beach Volleyball Tour Championships, presenting the gold medals to the men's competition winners, the Bellow Twins. That was it.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chairman. I'm sure you did better than I did at the volleyball one. There's one other announcement, which is that Susan Zeiss, our officer, Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer, has announced her retirement. She retires on the 18th of October. Susan took up this position at the Council in October 2020, leading the Council's legal democratic services, elections, registrars, land charges teams, and the statutory role of monitoring officer. So no wonder she needs to retire, I think. There have been so many complex and challenging issues in this aftermath of the local government reorganisation and the formation of our three towns, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, into one council. So I personally, and I'm sure the whole council, would like to thank Susan for her service and significant contribution to the council and wish her well. All the best for the future. Thank you very much, Susan. If anybody wants to clap, they're very welcome. Right, item 5, public issues. I've got a lot to say here, but it's about the time for questions, statements and petitions. It's that where a question or answer is to be given that is not reached within the time limit of the 15 minutes for everybody, we will send a written answer. Within 2 working days of this meeting, with a copy emailed to all councillors. But in accordance with our constitution, no discussion is allowed upon questions or statements. So, first public question, and I hope somebody is waiting out there for this. Daniel Glennon has submitted a public question. Are you coming down? Regarding the use of plant-based food at internal council meetings. Thank you, Mr. Glennon. If you like to ask your question now, and Andy Hadley, portfolio holder for climate, will respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So the science is clear that meat and dairy are major contributors to the climate and ecological emergencies. Other councils, for example, Oxfordshire County, Oxford City, Cambridge City, Exeter City and Lewisham Borough, are ensuring that all food served at events is plant-based, and I'm wondering if BCP Council could do the same. This is the logical next step after having declared a climate emergency. It will help normalise plant-based eating, which according to an Oxford University study is the most effective thing an individual can do to reduce their own environmental impact. So given the climate and ecological emergencies declared by this council, will the council ensure that all food and drink provided at internal events is plant-based as other councils have done? Even if this only applies to a small handful of events per year, it shows leadership and also will be a small step that sends a powerful message to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the applause. Thank you, Mr. Glennon. Councillor Andy Hadley is going to respond. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
Daniel, thank you for your question. I welcome your challenge. I do believe in leading by example, and I agree that changing to a meat and dairy-free diet is an important component of reducing our personal carbon footprint. However, we feel we should start by promoting and encouraging rather than mandating plant-based options in the first instance. The leader and I have both been in correspondence with representatives from the Plant-Based Treaty Organisation, and the leader met with them earlier today and has committed to talking to those councils that you listed that have adopted these principles. We are happy to consider the implications of such a decision in the next review of the climate plan, and from a personal perspective, I will seek to promote the concept throughout the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the next question is from Alex McKinstry. Mr. McKinstry, regarding the Standards Committee. Are you there to ask your question? And I know Councillor Ricketts, Chair of Standards, will respond. Good evening, Mr. McKinstry.
Thank you, Councillor Borden. Okay, on the 28th of February, the Standards Committee upheld a complaint against Councillor Mark Anderson, which revolved around a street cleaning initiative that was politically calculated. And summing up that night, the Chair of Standards said there were other areas of concern which the committee had identified, and they would be asking the Chief Executive to conduct a thorough further investigation into those concerns. Can the Leader of the Council clarify what precisely it was that the Chief Executive was asked to investigate, when the Chief Exec will be reporting back, and via what mechanism? If, on the other hand, no investigation is underway, and I say that because we've not heard anything about this matter since February, can we have the date when it was decided to abandon or simply not proceed with any investigation? Can we have the names of those who were involved in making that decision? And can we have the reasons for that decision?
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. Yes, I believe that Councillor Ricketts will now respond to that question.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr McKinstry for his question, as I also dislike loose ends, and this has given us the opportunity to publicly conclude this matter. As the then interim Chair of Standards, I sent an email to the Chief Executive on the 1st of March 2023 asking that he consider making inquiries into additional areas which were associated with, but not directly, the subject of the complaint before Standards Committee. I also requested that the Chief Executive refer the complaint to Dorset Police, asking them to review the decision not to take any further action in light of the findings of the committee. This was done, and Dorset Police confirmed their initial decision not to investigate the matter further. The Chief Executive then met with the statutory officers and, after establishing some facts internally, including a lack of wider examples, agreed that it would not be proportionate to take any further action.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. Now we have a question from Zoe Tees regarding the climate emergency, but this question is going to be read out by Sue Chapman. Sue, would you like to come forward?
Thank you. Good evening. Given that BCP Council's Head of Climate, Dr Montgomery's stark warnings in the Councillor's Workbook on Acting on Climate Change of October 2022 and BCP's February 2023 Draft Climate Action Strategy 2023-2028, when will BCP Council and all councillors have a meeting to discuss the workbook and various actions needed, such as promoting plant-based catering for all institutions, including schools, now that the charity ProVeg provides free consultations for councils and schools? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Hadley, would you like to respond to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sue, thank you for Zoe's question. When first appointed, I circulated the Councillor Workbook that was produced by our Head of Climate, Dr Montgomery, to all councillors back in June 2023 to ensure that both old and new members had sight of it. Matt has now unfortunately left the organisation, but we conducted 2 training sessions for members last week on climate change. We have also been reviewing progress against the Climate Change Action Plan that was previously circulated and published. We are planning a series of awareness-raising events both within the Council and with the public. With most schools running as academy trusts in the area, they are no longer directly in our control, but we will certainly be working with them, including to signpost them to available resources, such as promoting the link to ProVeg information. Schools who want to take this further can do so. Reducing consumption of meat and dairy products is an important strand of reducing our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question has come in from Mr Conor O'Luby about the Wessex Fields site, but unfortunately he's unable to be here tonight, so the Acting Chief Executive will read out the question.
Thank you. On the 7th of January 2020, BCP Council held a public consultation event at the Bridge, Littledown, regarding future developments on the Wessex Fields site. Please set out your current thoughts on development and whether the results of the consultation play any part in them.
Right, I think the Leader of the Council will respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Even though he's not here, I would like to thank Mr O'Luby for his question. I hope he's listening online. I remember the event at the Bridge in Littledown on the 7th of January 2020, where I presented to residents and partners about the options open to us at the time for Wessex Fields. This administration takes public consultation seriously and will always consider the views of the public and explain where things requested by the public cannot be progressed. I have asked officers to ensure that the output from that meeting is provided for background when proposals come forward for this site. Future Places were asked to look at possible development options for the Wessex Fields site as part of their project portfolio. The results of past consultations were passed to them so they could understand the views of key stakeholders at the outset of their project. As you may be aware, the Council is currently undertaking a review of the way in which regeneration work is delivered, and a paper which will include an update on this site will be coming to Cabinet on the 27th of September and will also be a subject of scrutiny on the 20th of September.
Thank you, Leader. Daniel Parkin has submitted a question regarding 16 to 17-year-olds in the care of BCP. Hello, Mr Parkin. Would you like to ask your question? And Richard Burton, portfolio holder, will reply.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the information that I'm about to announce has been provided to me by compliance team, Children's Services, as there was some concern regarding my data. So anyway, here we go. Excuse me. In December last year, there were 144 16 to 17-year-olds in the care of BCP, 28 of whom were living in semi-independent or independent accommodation with no day-to-day care or supervision. 8 months on, as from August, this number has risen to 526, with 65 of them receiving no day-to-day care at all. This is an increase of 365% in care and 232% in unsupervised care. So please, can I ask the following questions? A, can you shed any light on why this significant increase has taken place over the last 9 months? What plans, if any, are in place to reduce the instances of vulnerable children entering unsupervised accommodation? And finally, what are you doing to address the fact that these children's records are still on paper file, to the point where your department can't give me basic details of how many of these children receiving counselling or support? The reason they're giving is it's too much information that can be supplied under an FOI unless I pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Parkin, for your question and giving me the opportunity to talk about young people at full council. All council officers and councillors in this chamber and throughout the council are corporate parents, and so we all have an interest in this question. I have an answer based on the data I've received. I would love to have a dialogue with you about this. Unfortunately, as we heard, we can't do that at full council, but I would, however, welcome the chance to discuss this question with you further, because I'm sure my answer will raise more questions for you. In December 2022, there was 508 children in care, aged 0 to 18. With this cohort, we had 143 children who were 16 and 17. 63 children living in semi-independent living arrangements. All these children were receiving support. The package of support offered would depend on the level of need. Answer to part A of your question. We currently have 534 children in care aged 0 to 18. From this cohort, we have 151 children aged 16 to 17 years old. 65 children are living in semi-independent living arrangements. All these children will be receiving a package of support that is assessed against individual needs, and we have a statutory responsibility to provide this. There's been no significant increase in vulnerable children living in semi-independent accommodation. The number has increased by only 2 in the past 2 months. Part C, all children's records are kept electronically. We do collect data to monitor performance, including the number of children who receive support. As I said, please do get in touch with me directly so we can have further discussions about this.
Thank you, Mr Parkin. Sorry, Mr Parkin, thank you for that. Thank you. And we now have Mr Philip Stanley Watts, who has submitted a public question regarding concrete in some public buildings. Is Mr Stanley Watts here? All right. Do you want me to read it? Yes, we're going to provide a written answer for Mr Stanley Watts about the concrete in some public buildings. Sorry?
Do you want me to read it?
Oh.
Shall I read it?
Well, yes, you can. You're welcome to reply, Leader. Who would stop you? Would you like... Acting Chief Executive will read out the question then.
Thanks for giving me something to do, Vicky. In light of the crisis in the concrete on some public buildings, what inspections have taken place on BCP public buildings? Also, will there be a more sustainable building materials policy within the planning framework?
Leader, over to you.
Thank you, Acting Chief Executive and Chairman, for that. In answer to Mr Sani-Watt's question, the Council is currently assessing all of its corporate estates, including BCP Homes buildings, to identify any buildings that, due to their age or construction, may contain RAC. That's reinforced aerated something or other concrete. The information we currently have on our building stock does not suggest that RAC is present in our buildings, but we are carrying out a comprehensive review over the coming weeks to confirm the situation. I understand this should be completed by beginning of November. This will include all properties owned by the Council, including those leased out to third parties or used by community organisations. It should be noted that the presence of RAC does not mean that a building is inherently unsafe. It would be necessary to understand how it has been used, what condition it is in order to determine any mitigation measures that may be required. In respect of your second point, which relates to future building materials policy, the climate change chapter in the local plan will require new buildings to take a fabric-first approach to energy efficiency. Whilst we won't be able to prescribe the materials developers will have to whilst we won't be able to prescribe materials, developers will have to reduce energy loss and demonstrate this through an energy statement. Whereas the local plan deals with external appearance, the building regulations cover the technical aspects. The future home standards will come into effect through the building regs in 2025, which is when the local plan will be adopted. This standard will require that new homes are net zero ready. For commercial buildings, we will continue to require BREEAM, very good or excellent standards, which will require developers to provide sustainable buildings. I hope that gives him some reassurance.
Thank you, Leader, and I'm sure that somebody will email that very nice long answer. Right, I think that's the last question from the public. Now we have a public statement from Sue Chapman. Sue, would you like to come forward? I gather you've got some props.
Thank you. This chocolate teapot represents the failure of policies and communications regarding the terrifying emergencies acknowledged by Dr. Montgomery's report of a year ago, as well as by BCP's draft Climate Action Strategy of February 2023. Spelling out the emergencies and multiple risks to well-being must be prioritised immediately before more precious time is lost. Decarbonisation at speed and scale is essential. The ecosystems that sustain us continue to collapse. Such appalling failures must not be allowed to happen. Tobias Ellwood points out that every citizen must unite to tackle this huge threat to our planet and humanity. Yet environmental literacy continues to be undermined and the risks underplayed. The public deserves an easy-to-understand, immediate update with guidance and incentivisation as to how they can all help before society breaks down, we lose everything, and bequeath a most desperate legacy to those we should be safeguarding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And it's an interesting teapot you did bring with us, although we couldn't see it. Last thing on item 5, petitions. There have been no petitions received for this meeting. So that ends item 5. Right, we're on to items of business, which are the recommendations from the Cabinet and the committees. Now, the Council is asked to consider recommendations 6 to 10, which we'll take them separately as set out on your agenda. I want to highlight that there are decisions on some of these issues which have already been taken under the delegated powers by the relevant bodies and are therefore not before the Council. Right. Item 6. from the Cabinet of the 26th of July 2023, minute number 5, the Financial Outturn Report. Councillor Cox, I understand you will move this recommendation, and then Councillor Slade will second this move. If any councillors wish to speak, they can speak to this for their 3 minutes. Councillor Cox, over to you.
Thank you. Madam Mayor. I have pleasure in introducing this report for the Financial Outturn 22-23. The report, as outlined in here, does provide a little bit of good news given the mountain of debt and deficits that we've inherited from the previous Conservative administration. Let me start by reminding Council of the dire financial state which BCP was left in just 6 to 9 months ago. The collapse of the ill-fated Beach Hut scheme, which was proposed by the former leaders, Councillors Mellors and Broadhead, left Council going cap in hand to the government for an emergency loan of £70 million, otherwise known as the Capitalisation Direction. Conditions of the Capitalisation Direction included finance and governance review, a full plan to address a budget gap in 23-24, and assurance of a return to traditional accounting and methods of financing. In order to comply with the conditions, BCP was forced to put a freeze on non-statutory spending to generate a reduced raid on reserves. It was already up to 30 million, had to be brought down to 20 million. Arrange a fire sale of assets to finance the ballooning transformation costs and avoid the loan. A few months later, of course, we all know that there was a disastrous plan was hatched by the administration of Councillors Mellor and Broadhead to ignore the later assurances of traditional accounting and try one last-ditch effort for dodgy financing, namely to borrow money to cut council tax. After appeals for sanity by some officers and threats from the auditor, our illustrious former leader finally resigned, leaving others to pick up the pieces. This report sets out the financial results of a year in which most of it was under significant and severe financial restraint. It is reassuring, therefore, that the Council did manage to reduce the raid on its reserves from 30 million to 20 million. We avoided the capitalisation direction with literally hours to spare. And furthermore, due to the diligent and hard work of officers and a new prudent approach, we were able to put aside amounts to mitigate the risks associated with future places and unidentified transformation savings, as well as increase the level of unearmarked reserves. Speaking of reserves, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention, in particular, to the reserve levels which have been, again, plummeted by over 50% if you include DSG. The 23-24 budget plunders these reserves again by circa £29 million. The current trajectory is completely unsustainable. Without a significant dose of realism and old-fashioned professional scepticism, BCP will be headed to the financial rocks. Turning a ship the size of BCP round is not easy, and of course we have now set, the course we have now set will attempt to repair the damage and steer us to calmer waters. However, that's my assessment of the financial outturn. I'm sure others will have a different one, but I would like to recommend to the Council that it approve the 23-24 environments to accept the new grants which were set out in Appendices. And these were namely to accept an additional £1.8 million to do with the Levelling Up Fund, to accept £3.8 million grant funding for the Highways Active Travel, which is used to invest in the delivery and development and improvement of a number of walking, wheeling and cycling infrastructures, and also to accept £1.9 million grant funding for the A35 safety works. So with that, I would like to recommend that to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox, and I believe Councillor Slade is going to second this.
Happy to second, but reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Right, councillors, open to debate for your 3 minutes. Looking round for hands raising. Nobody. Gosh, okay. David. I can't remember what his name is. David what? Hmm? What's David? David what? Yes, okay. We seem to have only Councillor Brown, who sort of raised his hand and then put it down again. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to back up really what my colleagues just said about the financial outturn. Obviously, the recommendation before Council tonight is to approve the capital environments, to accept new grants, as was stated in Appendix C. But we haven't heard it yet tonight, but I heard it a bit at the Cabinet meeting that discussed this, and I've heard it elsewhere about the fact that the previous administration are claiming a sort of £10 million surplus on last year. And, I look at this, and I've been around local government finance for long enough to know that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around local government finance, and it's difficult for the public to understand. But I just wanted to sort of put it into layman's terms, really, that this £10 million surplus in the financial outturn, supposed £10 million surplus, to me is more like a £20 million deficit. If I earned £27,000 in a year, and I looked at my finances, I thought, I need to draw £3,000 out of my savings account to get through this year, then I've got £30,000 to spend. If I only spend £29,000 during the year, I'm not going to celebrate the fact that I've still got £1,000 surplus because I've had to take £3,000 out of my savings accounts. To me, I've still spent £2,000 more than my income. And you multiply those numbers by 10,000, and that's approximately where BCP was last year. We actually spent about £20 million more than our income. We had a £20 million deficit. And the previous year under the Conservative administration we had a deficit. And the previous year under the Conservative administration we had a deficit. They claim surpluses, but every year they've spent more than the council's collected in income. They've run deficits for the last 3 years. And just for the public that are listening, that is why we are where we are, because we've had 3 years of running deficits, draining our savings to fill the gap, and there is no savings to drain anymore. And that's why we are where we are. And so I'd just like to commend my colleague in what he's doing in bringing back traditional financial approaches to the council's finances.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think I see Councillor Tarling wishing to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. As one of the new members of this council, it's obviously not a nice way to join a council and are very early into our first bout of meetings. We're looking at quite serious cuts to the budget. But I think I speak for a lot of people that, the situation we've got at the moment, that this is a stitch in time. We need to do this so that we can ensure that we set the ship on the right course. And I know, speaking to some other councillors recently about projects we might have in the long term going forward and where we want to see BCP go as a council. I'm confident that this pain that we're going to go through for this year, possibly next year, maybe even the year behind that, is going to set us in 4 years' time, 5 years' time and beyond in a better financial footing going forward. So, I thank my colleague here for obviously not sugarcoating this pill at all that we've got to take. And, I wholeheartedly support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling. I think we saw Councillor Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you for that kind of clear kind of analysis of the past, present and future, if you like. One of the comments that came out, for me as a councillor on the doorstep and more of a grassroots councillor, is what the public are saying to us about the smoke and mirrors and where has the money gone and who made the decisions, what money went into what hands. Why do we not see a lot of outcomes for some of the monies that have been spent? And some of them are quite massive. And on the doorstep, people have lost trust in BCP as a consequence of the last couple of administrations. And we have a job to rebuild that trust. But we cannot rebuild that trust if we haven't got the answers, public scrutiny of the books of BCP over the past administrations, how those decisions were made, not to point the finger at anybody and say it's your fault or you shouldn't have done that, but to see what mistakes were made, because that's the only way we can plot out a future. Well, we did that and it was wrong, so we better not do that again. Why didn't we do this? Which people were involved? But more importantly, the public scrutiny, we need to be able to say some simple answers. You try getting sense out of people on the ground about future places, and I won't go into it anymore, but certainly in Hamworthy, it's a hot topic. As a councillor, I can't give any information. They've been at the job for years, but we haven't seen anything, so I'll just kind of stop there. So it's public scrutiny and get the message out so we as councillors are empowered to build the trust in us again, because it's gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Hadley, did I see your hand going up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the environments ever so quickly, because I think in amongst our very big financial difficulties, it is good that we managed to get some money from government for specific purposes, and it is for very specific purposes. So these three things, the Levelling Up Fund, the Active Travel Fund, and from the Safety Fund for the A35, are for specific schemes. They allow us to move forward on trying to do good things in our public space to improve safety and utility for our public. So they're small amounts of money, but they are still welcome in terms of trying to improve areas that need investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Have we got anybody else? Oh, hello. Councillor Jason.
Right, sorry, I'd just really like to hear a differing opinion to Mike's, because I'm very interested to hear how grim he thinks the finances are. But the way this discussion has carried on is as if nobody who was involved in the previous administrations in the room. I mean, a lot of them are here. I mean, my understanding is that the financial situation is not perceived to be anywhere near as bad. I'm reading Phil's blog, so he says, closer look at the small print reveals a different story to the £44 million gap, with the Conservative administration leaving a significant surplus in excess of 15 million, and there are £30 million in savings planned that are being ignored. I'd like to hear a differing point of view. I'm just curious. I want to hear an alternative to the doom and gloom. Because maybe the doom and gloom is right, but I would at least like to hear that challenge by some of the people who were involved in the previous administration, because nobody goes into politics to do harm, to do good. I'm sure there are no idiots in this room. I really would like to understand how we've got here. It would be nice to hear something from people who were involved in the last administration.
Thank you, Councillor
Hope that's
Salmon.
okay.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. I'm sure everybody has got a chance to either speak or reply. I know, Councillor Slade, you reserved your right. Do you want to speak now?
I'd really rather wait till after Councillor Broadhead's spoken, if that's okay.
Do you know, I'm so sorry, Councillor Broadhead. I didn't realise you'd risen to that bait. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm quite happy to give a few of the backgrounds, as one of my colleagues has mentioned. This is an extended discussion for what is an approval to accept grants from government. So whether this is the time or the place, which is why I was reluctant to stand up, this should be a much deeper and firmer discussion, I think, that we have at scrutiny, and we have yet to have the opportunity to delve into those details. I think it's coming to the next scrutiny meeting. And like Councillor Hadley, I would agree in welcoming a number of the awards that we've had from government. Not small amounts, as he said. You know, £20 million for levelling up is not anything to be sniffed at and will make a difference. But I don't dispute a lot of what has been said. The scale of the challenge that we are facing, and many local authorities are facing, is quite large. And you will hear from the administration on an almost hourly basis the £44 million gap that we've got next year. Now, you referenced the Twitter feed that I put on, or X feed that I put on recently, around the difference of that gap to what was purported in the budget back in February. Well, actually, the gap is exactly the same. The gap was £44 million then, and the gap is £44 million now. What was different is that our projections at that time included some of the savings, efficiencies, and transformation savings that were already in the pipeline. that has now been taken out in order to, as I assume, do exactly the same in their own image. And if you do that and you actually look back over the preceding years, you will find that that scale of the challenge is something that we have had to deal with every single year. I look back to this time last year. What was the budget gap that we had to look at for the following year? It was £43 million. And yet we did it, and we took the challenge head on. And that's not including the £55 million of savings that we additionally had to make through the cost of living crisis that wasn't even planned at that time. And then the previous year to that, the scale of the challenge for the following year was also just under £40 million. So every year, you're absolutely right. We have to make very difficult decisions. We have to look at our reserves, and I do challenge some of Councillor Cox's points, because a lot of those reserves were actually earmarked reserves, precisely there to be used for the process of bringing, as the Chair said, the three councils together, which does come with a cost. But yes, every year we do have challenges. Every year we try and do the very best we can. And I just find it a little bit of a shame that the most recent assurance review called this chamber extremely political. I thought we'd moved on beyond that, and all I've seen to hear tonight is a continuation of that behaviour. You won't hear it from me, and I'll try and rise above it. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sure we wouldn't, Councillor Broadhead. Thank you for that. I am trying to look at hands. I can't see any more apart from Councillor Slade, and then, of course, Councillor Cox will wind up. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief because Councillor Broadhead is correct that the only item of this paper that was for Council to decide was to accept the grants, and we should always be welcoming of grants as long as they don't come with match funding. That's where it causes a problem. But these grants are really welcome, and actually the reality is that going forward we are going to need to rely more and more heavily on grants because our revenue budget is so tight and our remaining reserves are so low. What I would say, though, in good news, is that because what we had in August was a best value notice and not a Section 114 or a more rigorous government intervention, we are still allowed to apply for grants. The irony is, if things had got any worse, we would not actually be allowed to apply for the grants that may help us to stay out of an even more sticky situation. But I just want to clarify a couple of things. There was a reference there to the fact that there's not been an opportunity to scrutinise this information. Well, I would challenge that on two fronts. The first thing I would say is that any councillor and any member of the public are able to and encouraged to come to Cabinet. You can ask a question at Cabinet, you can be involved in the Cabinet. Unfortunately, when we had Cabinet a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have many people turn up to Cabinet, and I don't think Councillor Broadhead was there for the whole of it, but was there for part of it. But the real reason why you haven't had any scrutiny is because the previous administration sadly removed pre-decision scrutiny. Otherwise, there would have been a scrutiny meeting deliberately to debate it before Cabinet took place. I hope later on in the agenda that will be resolved. I would also clarify the reference to the £44 million being there before. The reason that we have not taken the transformation savings, we have taken the actual other savings, is because they were unidentified. Now, if something is unidentified, it is ridiculous to include it. If they had been identified, if we had a list, they'd be there. They weren't. And the other point I would just like to make is, please do have a look at the Audit and Governance meeting from last week. The auditor's report was damning. It was read all the way through. So anyone that tries to put this positive spin, Councillor Broadhead referred to rainbows. I referred to crocs that weren't at the end of the rainbow, but other types of crocs, not the ones you wear on your feet. Actually, we really do need to be realistic. The council is in a mess. We are no different from lots of other councils. Southampton said yesterday they were running £2 million a month over their figures. That's £24 million a year. We are in a worse situation than that because we're a bigger council. But the truth is, last year it wasn't just taking the earmark reserves. It was taking money to prop up our day-to-day budget. That has to stop. It's happened the last 3 years. It means some horrible decisions are going to have to be made, but we're brave enough to take them, and we're going to ask all of you to back us and take those decisions together, because that way we will keep control of our council in the long run, so we can actually design a council that works for the people of BCP, and that's what really matters.
Thank you, Leader. members, can I just say that we're not an audience, we are members. We don't need to do clapping. I encourage clapping to say that sorry, Susan, I nearly called you councillors, nice. But in general, I think we would do better if we didn't clap at everything that we approve of. We can just approve of it. Councillor Cox, would you like to sum up before we
I'd sum up by thanking everybody for contributing to the debate. I'm sorry if I sound like Mr McCalber at times, but I'll try and keep it more upbeat in future. I'll leave it there and recommend the recommendations to Council. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So, members, we now have a recommendation, minute number 5, that the Council, and this is C on the agenda, approves the 2023-24 capital virements to accept new grants above £1 million as set out in your Appendix C. Can we have consensus for that, or do we want a show of hands in for the recommendation? Agreed? Consensus? Thank you very much, members. That's very encouraging. We move on now to item 7. This is the item which Councillor Cox will move initially, but when we vote on the particular item that is relevant to Christchurch Town Councillors, they will leave the room. Am I doing that right, Leader? Right. Thank you. So, Councillor Cox, if you can move it to start with, and then we'll go through the items one by one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd pleasure in moving the item number 7. As I said, I will be removing myself when it comes to recommending to Council item bullet point 4 on the first section. However, this whole section is to do with the medium-term financial plan, and it's the first medium-term financial plan that we set out as a new vision for the way that the finances of this authority will be run under this administration. Gone will be the non-traditional financing models so loved by the previous administration, and we will be taking some prudent, honest, traditional and transparent accounting and financing. As a first act, and as has already been referenced by Councillor Broadhead and the Leader, we have deleted any savings items which were not substantiated. So they were unsubstantiated, and therefore, in my opinion, they were just mythical. And they haven't either, none of them have been scrutinised. The previous administration masked fundamental risks with pipe dreams and flannel. The Conservatives inherited a balanced budget when you took over the Unity Alliance, from the Unity Alliance, after adding back COVID grants. This has already been approved by the one Section 15 officer. They have left us with a £44 million deficit, including £9 million of unidentified savings in the current year and £1.6 million of savings from the previous year. This is a direct result of spending on vanity projects, failed transformation targets and uncontrolled spending. They have left us with a mountain to climb, and it will be painful. We need to be bold and brave and to challenge that this is the way we've always done it approach. We will need to think, I'm afraid, the unthinkable. As an administration, we are committed to consulting with members and the public and to listen to the views and opinions, no matter where they come from. As a result, as a second act, we have committed to reduce the debt threshold from 1.3 million to 755 million, partly to reduce our risk levels and partly to hand back scrutiny to audit and governance, which I think a lot of members here will welcome. But this has already been scrutinised by audit and governance, and appears later on in the agenda. If we are to continue to pursue the transformation projects, we need to fund this by the disposal of assets. And a cross-party party group was commissioned to commission the following assets to be disposed of, and to achieve this, and I would recommend to Council this is approved. I would like to therefore recommend the approval to the Council of items for St Ambrose College, 27 High Street, Christchurch, and the public convenience in Adderstraw Square. And I will stop there and let somebody else recommend those, and therefore I will now leave the room as instructed. Thank you.
Sorry. Has everybody left that needs to leave? One thing I would say before we go deeply into this and before Councillor Slade seconds the list that we've got before us is that there's an appendix attached to the report. This is exempt. If councillors want to comment or discuss that confidential appendix, we need to exclude the press and public. So please keep the debate or the discussion away from Appendix A, which we have all read. Is that right? Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. With the permission of the Chair, Councillor Brown, I understand you're going to propose the fourth bullet point, but also just to point out that Councillor Cox may have omitted inadvertently to propose recommendation F. So I wondered if you could pick that up in your proposal as well, please, unless you would like to call him back into the chamber. I don't know.
Thank you to the monitoring officer. Yes, I'd agree because of the interest declarations of my colleague and others in the room who've had to leave, as they are Christchurch Town Councillors, that under the recommendation to Council, I'd like to propose approving the asset for disposal of the Waitrose car park Christchurch on the condition that it is only to Christchurch Town Council. So I'd like to propose that fourth bullet point that we've got in front of us. I'm also happy to propose item F about approving a reduction in the working capital loan facility to BCP Future Places Limited. The value and timing of the reduction to be delegated to the Director of Finance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And now I'm calling upon the leader who can second the whole of this recommendation, or all the parts of it.
I'm happy to second, and I will reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, as I say, we do not particularly wish to approach the appendix unless somebody particularly wants to, in which case you need to indicate to me and we will go into private session. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did ask in the preceding events of this council that if we could take the items that are mentioned in recommendation E separately. I'm happy to explain why I want that, but I was told there was no procedural way in which I could arrange for that vote to be taken separately. But I would ask your discretion, Chair, to be able to take votes on those 4 items separately. There are reasons why I'm doing this, and it may be that all of those items we would support, but there are particular reasons why I'm asking for that to happen, Madam Chair, and I'm seeking your discretion to enable us to vote on those items separately.
I think members would be very happy to do that. So, yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Just as the proposer of the fourth one there, I'm happy to accept that, and maybe for administration purposes it may be easier to refer to them as item E, Roman numeral 1, Roman 2, Roman 3 and Roman 4, rather than just 4 bullet points, just for ease of administration, ease of understanding.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. You've totally baffled me with items, Roman numerals and goodness knows what. I think it's going to be easier to take each item as it's named, if that's all right with members. And the item that I have, which we would debate first, taking each one separately, is St Ambrose Cottage. So, members, I will ask for views.
Councillors who've left the room can come in for this debate, Chair.
Yes, okay.
I wondered whether you would like to take Waitrose first and then...
Yes, it does make sense, and I hadn't thought of it, which just goes to show why one needs officers, that we will take Waitrose car park first, and then we can invite the rest of the councillors back in. So Waitrose car park, Christchurch, only to Christchurch Town Council. We're starting the debate on that one. Leader, it's no good looking at me like that. That's what we're debating now.
I'm struggling to think of the point in the Constitution that allows me to ask why we aren't discussing the principle rather than the individuals, because I recognise there might be issues there, but there might be a point of principle around the asset disposals themselves, which I'm not quite sure at what point you can talk about that if we're only talking about the actual address. So I'm a bit confused myself, which I apologise for.
So
now the acting chief exec is looking as confused as me. So this item is to approve the list of disposals, but by actually talking about each individual item, there's a risk that we're not actually talking about the fact that the principle of the administration saying there is a list of disposals to be assets to be disposed of, actually, which may be lists 1, 2, 3 and 4, but what about the principle of disposal itself?
Right, so I think we go back to the beginning before...
I think because that's not in the recommendation, there isn't... We're not.
Sorry, we're having a bit of a debate, a clarification here. I'm going to ask the acting chief executive to explain this when she's ready. No, we're going to ask the monitoring officer to explain it. Thank you.
It is. Sorry, I will explain. So because we have to, what you're voting on is the recommendations that have come from Cabinet to Council, and those recommendations on the disposal of the assets rather than the principle of asset disposal. The Cabinet report received an Appendix C, which sets out the principles that had been proposed by the working group, were then agreed by Cabinet. So this item is on the disposals rather than the principles.
Thank you
for
that clarification.
Okay?
Members, I have in my mind, and I hope this is right now after the debate around this table, that we are debating not the principle of Waitrose Car Park, the disposal of Waitrose Car Park, Christchurch, as proposed by Councillor Brown, and I assume seconded by Councillor Slade. So, members, after all that, is there any debate? Councillor Hadd.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so obviously we did look at the potential disposal of Christchurch Car Park previously to the landlord of Waitrose, and that was a major concern in terms of the income to the council and the possibilities that that site might get reused other than as a car park. I'm rather less concerned to hand it over to Christchurch Town Council, because clearly then it is in control of those people who probably have the greatest interest in making sure that it serves the needs of Christchurch Town. It is an income-generating asset, I would guess, to us, and therefore there's a concern with that. But clearly, if we can then use that capital receipt for transformation, then I think that is a reasonable assistance to what we have to do now and part of the difficult decision-making that we have to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Right, I'm going to call on Councillor Slade. Did you wish to speak as a seconder, or do you?
I'm just seeking clarification.
Yes. I think we're all perfectly happy to hear everybody speak 4 times on each separate piece, and then we approve the whole thing, which has been approved in principle. So we're still concentrating on Waitrose Car Park, Christchurch, only to Christchurch Town Council. Leader, did you want to speak on that before we take that one separately?
Yeah. Oh.
Councillor Beasley, I do apologise.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I did indicate earlier, but I wasn't clear as to whether the leader was moving or speaking or summing up. So I hope that's as clear to everybody as it is to me. As Councillor Hadley has referred to, about 3 years ago, the Council considered this potential site for sale. And I recall that from this side we abstained on the proposal, leaving it to councillors from Christchurch to effectively make a decision on it. In the event, all other members of the council voted against the sale of the car park, so I found it surprising to see this proposal coming back to Cabinet and then on to council so soon. I assume, or indeed be able to buy it. As far as BCP councillors are concerned, it's also hard to see the advantages of the loss of considerable income to this council at a time when we hear time and again how strapped for cash the revenue budget actually is. The more pertinent concern that I have, though, is the loss of control and the ability to influence the future for the wider site should there be redevelopment proposals for this part of Christchurch in the future. That isn't to say that there are any, but we all know that over time things change. When one piece of the jigsaw moves, lots of other things follow. And it occurs to me that in those circumstances, a major redevelopment of a much wider site would leave us without any influence at all in that process. Rather, it would be down to Christchurch Town Council. So this decision by the administration to sell appears to me to be being taken with some haste. And I'm concerned that the council may well regret the loss of control and the loss of the wider best value considerations by dealing immediately with it as it is with just one preferred bidder. Best value is hard to determine at the best of times. When you have a preferred bidder that's another council, it becomes inserted in the future. But the true market value of the car park has not been tested, and I believe it should be. I should be voting against the proposal, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Personally, and I've actually had quite a few visits in my last 12 months as Mayor of Poole to other towns throughout Dorset, and many of them do operate car parks as is proposed for Christchurch. Although I wonder whether they could actually afford that asset. But if they want that asset, and the alternative that was talked about was to sell it to Waitrose, and therefore it becomes part of a possible development package in the future if Waitrose decided that it wanted to do something sort of different, then it loses that car park. Whereas at the moment, it does keep it in control of the town council, which I think is quite important. As I say, it appears beneficial to the towns I've visited to have ownership of car parks, so I personally support the proposal.
Can I just clarify? Thank you, Councillor Trent. It actually is not called Waitrose Car Park, it's the Bypass Car Park, and I think we're getting a bit hung up on the fact that there is a Waitrose there. Councillor Dove, I think you were next.
Thank you. I can't begin to express my surprise at seeing the selling off of Bypass Car Park, given the amount of fuss that was made last time, not least by the very person who's putting forward this proposal this evening. I appreciate it was Councillor Brown, but obviously the author of the report. The asset disposal is being sprung upon us all without any scrutiny, consultation with the public or other businesses, and I don't mean just Waitrose, who'd be affected by this. When this subject matter was broached last time, the administration listened to the extremely strong feedback expressed in this same chamber and let those who know Christchurch best make the decision over what is best for Christchurch and also what residents want to see happen. The message was clear: do not sell off the car park and let it be retained as a BCP asset. There were accusations of asset stripping. Councillor Cox criticised the quality of the valuation report and the fact that no other options were being considered. And the concerns were raised that the valuation was too low. But of course, as we've heard from Councillor Broadhead, that the then financial situation is no different to the one that we now face today. So what is new? Nothing, nada, zilch. The only difference that I can see is that this administration seems to adopt the principle of one rule for one and one rule for another, so much so that this administration is actually ignoring its own advice. The report presented to us this evening is simply quite appalling. There is scant information for us to be able to make an informed decision. There are no alternative options presented, and the report comes with its own health warnings, stating that the estimated sales values are derived from internal records which may not reflect current market positions and conditions. So it transpires without any research, without any current valuations, that the administration is prepared to carry out backroom secret deals without understanding or realising the true value of an asset which is not owned, let's remember, by these councillors, but by the residents of BCP. Even more concerning is the report does not seem to understand the income being generated by this car park. The public media reports in 2022 that the income during a normal year was £300,000 per annum. But there is a significant discrepancy and a reduction in the car park income recorded in this report that we have today, before us today. Why is that? More unverified numbers just like the valuation? Councillor Phipps stated, "It seems like Christchurch assets are not safe. I do hope this trend is not going to continue." And I echo the words of the now Chair, Councillor Leslie Dedman, who said this when the selling of the bypass car park was heard in this chamber. At the first opportunity, this administration is selling the family silver, and a lot of residents take this view. And I couldn't have expressed it better when describing the actions of this administration, of which the Christchurch Independents are part of. It is shameful. There is no reason why this is being hurried through in this manner.
Are you nearly finished, Councillor Dove? Because you had your 3 minutes.
Thank you. And there's no explanation why a healthy asset is being sold when it returns an income to the council. So it's clear that all assets should either be sold by auction or by sealed bids, as proposed by the now leader. And I would like this to be adopted for this across the board for all of the assets that are being disposed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dove. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start off by saying that as a ward councillor, I attend the Christchurch Town Council meetings, and I've been there when this car park has been discussed. Firstly, when it was discussed when the sale was proposed to Waitrose by the former administration, and the Town Council and representing its residents of Christchurch were absolutely appalled of the thought that it was the bypass car park was actually being sold from underneath the feet of the people of Christchurch. Since then, the Town Council have approached the former administration in order to purchase this car park. They've made several approaches and they were refused. The reason that the Town Council wants to secure this car park is for the people of Christchurch. The idea being that the town council has the reserves available to it in order to secure this asset for the people of Christchurch into perpetuity. The further idea being that the income from that car park will also go to provide amenities for the people of Christchurch, for the town. It is not asset stripping BCP, it is actually asset providing for the town council to be able to provide for their residents. Thank you.
Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this item, to be honest with you, but I'm not going to say very much, but I'm quite aghast with what I'm hearing from that side of the chamber. They're opposing a sale, but they actually wanted to sell it before to Waitrose. And now, just because it's going to be kept by the town for the people, as my co-councillor has said, for me, it's a much better idea, and we actually will be keeping control of it, not losing control of it, which I seem to think will happen. So I just don't quite understand what's happening or what's being said over there, and I have to agree that the town council should be able to purchase this car park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps, and I think it's Councillor Andy Martin next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must admit I was somewhat confused by Councillor Beasley's logic about BCP is giving away control. Obviously, it's a point that Margaret's just made, Councillor Phipps has just made. That's exactly what you were going to do 3 years ago when you tried to flog it off. And the only reason, from my memory, the only reason you backtracked on that was you knew you were going to lose the vote, and so you decided you had no option but to hand it over, to make it look as though it was a decision for Christchurch. That's my first point. The second point is that, again, I completely agree with the point about the fact that this will be an investment in the people of Christchurch. And I make the point that I made at Cabinet last week, and Councillor Broadhead responded to it then. In the previous debate just now, you mentioned the £20 million levelling up money that's coming into Bournemouth and Poole. None of that, not a single penny, actually maybe a few £100 is coming into Christchurch. The last administration had no interest in investing in Christchurch. This proposal will put some badly needed investment into Christchurch. And the final point I would make, again, I think Councillor Beasley, who very helpfully, when I last spoke to him, wanted to distance himself from the previous administration and pointed out to me that he wasn't part of the previous administration. I'm not quite sure why, but not sure why he wanted to tell me that. One other thing has changed in the 3 years. The finances of this council have become far worse than they have ever been. As Councillor Cox pointed out, we're in a dire state. Now, I don't want to make a political point here, Councillor Broadhead, but we know that part of the reason for that isn't all down to you lot, but a lot of it is. So I think selling the asset, which we need to do to help fund transformation, is part of the reason that this is being done, and it's part of the problem that we've inherited from you. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll address a few of the points that we've heard about this evening. First of all, I do think it is worth pointing out, and Councillor Martin just referenced the Levelling Up Fund and money not going to Christchurch. Our own office has answered that question on Wednesday and actually pointed out that no part of Christchurch actually qualified for the criteria of the Levelling Up bid, which is why there was nowhere in that. That wasn't a decision of the previous administration. That was just because boxes have to be ticked, and I still think from a BC point of view we should welcome that. Councillor Beasley gave a little bit of the history lesson, but I do think it is worth reiterating because Councillor Phipps just said she's confused as to how we got to this position. When we took over as an administration back in 2020, this was already in the pile of decisions that were pending. This is not something that previous administration came up with. We already had a decision that was already in the pile of to-do lists to sell this asset because we had been told, or the previous administration to us had been told, that there was a threat of Waitrose leaving. We took the decision. I wasn't happy with it at the time, incidentally, and only trawling through my emails today looked back and made certain that if it did go ahead, and as Councillor Beasley pointed out, we were not in favour of that, there was going to be a reversion to the council if any development came back, so the ability for the council to buy it back if it was anything other than a car park. I don't see that in the current version. But what we did do is when it came to scrutiny, as Councillor Beasley pointed out, we said this should be a decision for Christchurch. It's a finely balanced decision. Do you want to risk Waitrose leaving? Do you want to therefore save Waitrose, or do you actually want to call their bluff? And there was a lot of differing opinions at the time, but I think unanimously the council, those that voted, decided to maintain the asset. I think it's important to give that decision. Things have changed since then, but we are still looking at a loss of an asset for BCP Council. And yes, it is going in the immediate term to the Town Council, but as Councillor Beasley says, we don't know what happens after that. There is income loss to BCP Council if we do it to the Town Council. And then the one thing I would say is, you made the point, Chair, that we shouldn't call this a Waitrose car park. Why else would the Town Council be wanting to purchase this asset unless they had been in discussions with Waitrose? And I know that's true because Waitrose have come up to me a number of times over the last few years and asked for a meeting with them and Councillor Cox, who had been in discussion with them in order to look at ways that they could further facilitate their use of the car park. I think that's a true reason for the transfer to the Town Council. Yes, it is another council, but our job today is to stand up as BCP councillors. We don't need to sell the asset. We don't need to lose the income. Let's protect it for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I was actually giving a point of accuracy because I do think that it should be called what it is, which is the car park on the bypass. The Waitrose, as you say, is a different matter. Sorry, Councillor J. Salmon.
So this debate seems a lot more complicated than I was expecting on this, because I thought 20 minutes ago we were all of one mind. Council's flat broke, income is less than the outgoings, and there's no money in the kitty. So we've got to sell some stuff off to fund the transformation, because to implement cost-saving measures, that costs money. That shouldn't be news to anybody here. If we're going to do the transformation thing, that takes cash. Now, unless Rishi Sunak or the billionaires running the country have decided to wang us a bunch of cash in the last hour or so, that's not happened, I don't think. We are flat broke. We've got to flog stuff off. This debate wasn't meant to be about the principle of asset disposable. It was meant to be about this specific asset. I've yet to hear a solid argument about why the working group got this wrong. I thought there actually was quite a detailed working group on it. The evidence is all there. I can't see a decent alternative. We're selling it to the Town Council, which seems ideal. Of all of the things we're discussing tonight, this seems like an absolute no-brainer. I think we should just be moving on to a vote. It just seems like an obviously good idea, and I've not heard why it's a bad one. Maybe I've missed something. But I feel like we're ready for a vote on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Andrews?
Thank you. I think we got to cast our minds back to February when the then leader of the council, backed up by Councillor Broadhead, was recommending a fire sale of assets including Wessex Trade Centre, Christchurch Way Industrial Estate. They were major assets producing income, but nevertheless they were recommending, and got it through because they had a slim majority at that time, the sale of those assets. So what has changed over the past few months? Reference this administration selling assets. The situation is actually a no-brainer, in my word, that it's clear that Christchurch Town Council would be the best guardian of this asset. My recollection of what was proposed a couple of years ago wasn't necessarily selling it to Waitrose. Waitrose don't own that building. I reckon they own very, very few of their supermarkets. They rent them from pension funds and things like that. If anything, if that car park had been sold, it would have gone to some foreign pension fund. I think we need to recall what the previous administration was doing early this year. And indeed, those assets were sold very, very quickly because the money was needed to balance the books before the end of March.
Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think things have changed. And what's changed is transformation and funding it. And here we have an opportunity to help fund transformation by the sale of an asset that will remain effectively under the control of BCP through the Town Council of Christchurch. This really doesn't make any difference to the control of the asset. It will still be used as a car park, and the benefit of the income will come into Christchurch. But the important thing is that it raises the money that we need for transformation, and it's got to come from somewhere. So this seems to me to be a very reasonable approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the benefit of those people that haven't been involved with this so far, or members of the public, these properties have been through a cross-party working group. That has included a member of the Conservative Party right the way through. That cross-party working group was meeting prior to the elections. I've just checked my emails, and an email was sent which included Councillor Bartlett to confirm the next meeting, but I understand the person who attended the meeting from the Conservative group was actually Councillor Beasley. Alongside him was Councillor Canavan, Councillor Dedman, Councillor Salmon, Councillor Bagwell, Councillor Rice, Councillor Moore. Every single group has been involved with this cross-party working group. These properties have come as a recommendation from that working group. There was also a reference from the other side that this hasn't been through scrutiny. I would remind everybody that that's because we haven't had scrutiny, because the previous administration removed pre-decision scrutiny. But I would remind people that this has been to Cabinet, which, I'll repeat, everyone is entitled to come to, can speak, can ask questions, and could have discussed it there. I don't recall this being raised as a major issue at Cabinet, and I'm us to do the transformation savings because the actual transformation savings were mythical, like the rainbow and the unicorn. You know, we have to do transformation if we're going to save this council, and I would really ask that we move to the vote on approving this to be disposed of to Town Council, unless Councillor Brown would like to sum up.
Councillor Brown, do you want to sum up before we go to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to sum up and add to what the leaders just said, actually. This bypass car park, we do need to sell it to fund transformation. We need these funds. And I'll just pick up on the points that have been raised during the debate. Councillor Beasley raised a couple of issues about loss of control and questions about best value, etc. I would just say that we are still the local planning authority for that area. So we do still have some control over what may happen on the site as the local planning authority and within the local plan. In terms of best value, I won't go into details of the confidential appendices, but there are provisions to protect the council's interests. And we have finance professionals and property professionals that make sure that the council's interests aren't detrimentally impacted. Somewhat shockingly, the comments about there's been no scrutiny about this, as the leader said, you need to speak to your colleagues within your own group. They've been there in the discussions about this. They've supported the endorsement of this. To then claim that this has come from nowhere and there's been no scrutiny of it, when the colleagues sat next to you have actually been in those meetings and those discussions, you need to look close to home and maybe discuss it in your group meetings, because all the groups in this room have been involved in those discussions and have supported the endorsement of this property for sale. So don't come here claiming there's been no scrutiny or no discussion. And don't come here claiming there have been backroom secret deals. Just earlier, the leader of the Conservative group commented about the political negative comments within this chamber and not wanting those, and then the person sat next to him has raised the issue of secret backroom deals, when members of her group have been in the discussions and the meetings. There are no secret backroom deals. That's not how this administration operates, and just saying it doesn't make it happen. This administration does not do secret backroom deals. And just thirdly, Councillor Broadhead talked about income loss to the council. Yes, you know, if you have an income generating asset and you sell it for a capital sum, there will be a loss of regular income, just as like the rushed fire sale of income generating assets undertaken by the previous administration before the end of the financial year to bail out their transformation programme. They rushed them through. We had some excellent income generating assets that were rushed through as a fire sale by the previous administration. So don't come here talking to this administration about a carefully considered, cross-party considered proposal to sell an income generating asset. I move the motion to go ahead with this asset sale.
Thank you, members. Now, for ease of understanding, obviously my own understanding as well as everybody else's, we are on item 7, and the recommendation is E, but we're only taking 4 Waitrose car park, and I'll call it that because it's on the agenda, but only to Christchurch Town Council. And I'm going to ask for a show of hands because I know that there may be some dissension. Members in favour, please show. Thank you, members. Those against? Yes, I think we've got everybody. And abstention. Thank you. We're just going to allow the other members back in. I'm so sorry, I should have told you that that vote was carried. Thank you, members. I think everybody's come back in. I don't see... Right, thank you. We now proceed, still on the same item, 7, but we are now going to take the list of assets for disposal. The first one on the list is St Ambrose Cottage. That has been proposed by Councillor Cox and seconded. So, Councillor Cox, did you wish to speak to it separately?
No, thank you. I think we can just move to a vote.
Thank you. Members, any debate on this one? Right, I'm going to take that as a no debate. Members, can I have approval as a consensus? Thank you. That's approved. Next item, or next bullet point, I don't know how to describe them really, 27 High Street, Christchurch. Councillor Cox, you proposed this. Do you wish to speak again?
Thank you. We move to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Members, any debate on 27 High Street, Christchurch? I see no hands. Members, can we have a consensus on this item? Thank you, members. That's agreed. Now, we're moving on to the last item on this particular bunch, which is the public conveniences in Ad Astral Square, Camford Heath, Poole.
just move to a vote, if that's okay.
Right. Councillor Cooper. Right, okay. Councillor Cooper.
It's just a quick one about an impact assessment on toilets that are closed. I know they're not used at the moment, but when I used to work there in the Beacon Centre and the other youth centres in the town, they were used a lot by the general public. There's an elderly population there. So I'm just interested in what is the impact assessment of the closure of a public toilets, and also who would it be sold to, because it's in quite a prime bit. Is it going to the private sector? Is it coming back to us to develop as part of that square? So it's just those kind of intricate little details, but also the impact assessment on the community. Has one been done? And who did we speak to in terms of children, young people and their families on Camford Heath? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Regarding the toilets, and I speak as a ward councillor for Camford Heath, I could actually explain quite in a lot of detail, but there is a report, and some of the information you've asked for is actually in the report, but obviously you don't want me to go into confidential, so I'll be as brief as possible. And just to say that these toilets were actually closed over 10 years ago. They were not well used, and alternative facilities are available in the square. These toilets are, after 10 years, you can imagine what they look like. They're absolutely horrible to look at, and I'm sure that the new purchaser, who is actually extremely close to the existing toilets, if I can put it that way, will improve their appearance, incorporate it into their building, and put the space to extremely good use. There is no problem with the sale of these toilets. I am absolutely positive that everyone in Camford Heath will be really pleased that they're going to a new owner and will look a whole lot better. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Councillor Slade.
Yeah, can I just say that actually quite a lot of us have got toilets that were closed over 10 years ago, much too many of our discussed. And I would be very grateful if somebody would like to come forward and offer to purchase toilets in my ward so that they could be reopened without being at cost to the public. And so, you know, if anyone's listening to this and would like to offer to buy some more, then please do let us know, because it will help our transformation programme as well. But, you know, fundamentally, you know, we do have to do the right thing, and having an asset sitting empty and rotting for the last 10 years cannot be in anyone's interest. So I understand Councillor Cooper's concern, but I think given that it's been closed for so long, any impact that have been had on young people and older people in that community, I think, has been resolved over a period of time.
Thank you, councillors. I see no more hands. Oh, is that... Well, Councillor Cooper...
Take all that. I'm just, as an example, Hamworthy...
Councillor Cooper, we don't normally speak again, so have you got a...
Sorry.
Is it a point of order?
No.
Well, then,
it's just
thank
an observation.
No, thank you. We've had your say. Thank you.
I'll just send you an email.
Good. The best way of communication. Members, we are now talking about the public conveniences in Ad Astral Square, Camford Heath Pool. Have we a consensus on this, members? Agreed. That is a consensus then. Thank you, members. Right, that is the first part of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Canavan, for suggesting that way of approaching it. I think we've all now had a say. The next part of that, which Councillor Cox, you did not read out, but Councillor Brown did, which is F, approves the reduction in working capital loan facility to BCP Future Places Limited, the value and timing of the reduction to be delegated to the Director of Finance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance. Do we have anybody to speak on that? Right, thank you, members. Oh, Councillor Cox or Councillor Brown, did you either wish to speak? I'm so sorry. No. Thank you. I think I can see by your expression nowadays. Thank you, members. Do we have a consensus on that as well? Agreed. Thank you, members. So item 7 has all been agreed. Thank you, members. Item 8, hang on a second, turn the page. Item 8. This is the minute on the Children's Services Building Stronger Foundations programme, and I understand, Councillor Burton, that you will move the recommendations and Councillor Hannah will second it.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I shall be moving this. This paper provides for 4.462 million investment into children's services improvement and transformation, the so-called Children's Services Building Stronger Foundations programme. It also delegates to the Corporate Director of Children's Service, and I would say this bit in the paper, rereading it doesn't read very well, but just to make it clear, delegates to the Corporate Director of Children's Services and the Chief Financial Officer, establishing specific areas for investment and developing the structures and capacities to drive improvements. All the details are set out in the paper. It's been discussed at Cabinet, and Cabinet recommends it to Council. I'm not intended to go over everything we discussed at Cabinet, but I would like to highlight that this paper is a good news for children's services, and it's already had a positive effect on the service. By good chance, the Ofsted monitoring visit just happened to coincide with the next 2 days, and they viewed the decision very favourably. It's demonstrating the commitment of this Council to improvement in children's services. For those councillors who don't have the history with what went on, just a bit of background. In 2020, Ofsted visited a focus visit and said we have serious and widespread weaknesses. July 21, we had a joint local send inspection and a written statement of action. In December 21, we had a full, what they call the ILACs, a full Ofsted inspection, and that resulted in a statutory direction issued in March 22 with a DFE improvement advisor. We need to make more effective and efficient service, and these investments should produce these needed outcomes, which are a better outcome for children and young people, which is top of my agenda. The knock-on for that will be an improved on the current Ofsted score, and future savings in the medium-term financial plan. The most relevant thing to note here that a failing children's services is more expensive than a good one. However, investment is needed to move from inadequate to good. And I would just, as a side, mention that in between inadequate and good, we have to pass through requires improvement. Myself, at this moment in time, achieving this would be great. If we do, I'm thinking of having a T-shirt made, requires improvement. I think I should have had one years ago. And I'd be quite happy to wear it at the council as well. To drive improvements, we need to target early help. Supporting families is far more effective for improving children's outcomes than later statutory intervention. The report mentions indicative future savings of 3.9 million in 24-25, growing to 6.4 million in the year 26-27. Cabinet has already had sight of an outline business case, but we will receive a full business case to support the delivery of transformation in December this year. If the chair of the Committee of Children's ONS was a mind to it, I would be grateful for them to keep an eye on this progress of future savings which come out of this investment. And I do hope that all councillors will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. You did slightly run over your time, but I think we appreciated your sentiments. Councillor Hannah, do you want to second this now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Right, councillors, anybody wishing to speak on minute 10? So, Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is obviously good news, and I think we should record appreciation to all of the team that are doing their best to improve this service and keep it improving. But I do want to ask for clarification about whether that 4.462 million is entirely new money, or whether some of that money comes from service savings. So I would be grateful for that clarification so that we can understand where that 4.462 million is coming from. Thank you.
I don't think the answer. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to comment in support of this item. Members around the Chamber will be aware from the discussions we've already had this evening and over the weeks and months about the financial pressures this Council's facing. And for Cabinet to discuss this and agree £4.4 million for children's services in these difficult times really shows, I think, that we're getting our priorities right and we're putting the money where it's really needed for our children, young people, those with special educational needs and disabilities. It's necessary. I think just in terms of the last point, it's the funding is, I think it's covered earlier in the report, there's a part of it being released from some reserves, I think on the first page of the Cabinet report, but it is a sort of new money. It's a one-off investment to make these things happen this year. It's been funded, it's sort of one-off revenue money. But any further information, I guess, could be referred to the Section 151 office.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Burton, are you going to sum up? So I think Councillor Hannah wishes to speak, doesn't he?
I did reserve my right to speak, Chair, but I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. So, Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you. I shall make my summing up really short. Yes, this is new money. It's being funded from reserves. The hope is that this will create savings down the road, but this, at this moment in time, is money from reserves.
So, Councillor Burton, that wasn't your summing up, or was it?
Yes, Chair, that was my summing up. I did say I'd make it brief.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I thought you'd somehow come back without me knowing. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Tarling, Councillor Burton has summed up. So the debate is over.
It's regarding that summing up and the point of the clarification that he made at the start.
Is this a point of order?
A point of order, yes.
What number?
Could we please have it? I don't know the point of order, but rereading of the amendment to the recommendation. I didn't quite hear what Councillor Burton said. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Ms Zeiss to clarify.
Thank you. From what I understand Councillor Tarling to say, Councillor Burton, that he didn't quite hear when you amended that part of the recommendation that didn't make grammatical sense. So he wonders if you wouldn't mind reading that again, please. Is that correct, Councillor Tarling? Thank you.
Yes, sorry, just to be clear, I did not make an amendment. What I did is I tried to explain what the meaning was for that, so that people understood what it was. Just to clarify, all it's saying is that delegating the power to the Corporate Director of Children's Services and the Chief Financial Officer to establish specific areas for investment and developing the structures and capacity to drive improvement. So it's just trying to clarify what is meant. I did agree that it, as a sentence, it did seem quite lumpy, and I had to read it several times myself today to re-understand it. So that is the gist of what it actually says.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. And just to confirm, we will set that out in the minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, members. So we now have before us that particular minute 10. On item 8, which I think we've gone into sufficiently. It's A and B, and it goes over the page on my own agenda. I don't know if it does on yours. So A, D and E have already been resolved, so we are just simply voting, and I'm asking for consensus on both the recommendations A and B. Members, do we have consensus on this? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Both those items are... Members, we do sometimes have a comfort break after 2 hours. Do you want to have a comfort break now? Quick cup of coffee or not for 20 minutes? Or carry on? I think we have mixed views. We've got to have the break. Right, members, we're now back to the meeting. Thank you very much for coming in slightly earlier than I said. And we are now live streaming again. Now, on my agenda, we have got up to item 8 from Cabinet of 26th of July 2023, minute 10. No, we've done that one. Oh, members, we're actually on item 9. That's even better than I thought. Item 9, Audit and Governance Committee, 27th of July again. Minute number 8, Treasury Management Monitoring Outturn 2022-23 and the update for Quarter 1 2023-24. Councillor Andrews, I think you're moving the motion, or the recommendation rather, and Councillor Connolly is seconding.
That's correct, Madam Chair. This is a recommendation from ANG to the Council that the revised prudential indicators set out in Table 10 of the ANG Committee report be approved. I think my colleague may want to...
Yep, happy to second this, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor.
May I carry on? As per the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, or CIFA, Treasury Management Code, it is for full Council to approve the Treasury Management Strategy every year. Any amendment to this strategy and prudential indicators needs also to be approved by full Council. ANG Committee on the 27th of July was presented with the Treasury Management Update Report, which recommended to reduce the Council's approved debt cap, known as the operational boundary, and authorised limit. Specifically, the authorised limit was recommended to be reduced from 1.384 billion down to 785 million pounds. That's about a 44% reduction. Details of the proposal are set out in agenda item 9, page 111, and then pages 118, particularly paragraphs 29 to 34 of the Council's agenda. It refers to recommendation 4. This is the one that we have to approve at full Council. Now, a couple of years ago, the Council approved a debt threshold significantly above the level that it previously committed to demonstrate its willingness to consider use of borrowing to underpin its big plan ambitions. This resulted in significant concerns around the risk associated with those high levels of debt. So it is proposed to reduce. However, to be clear, this reduction does not reduce the ambition of this Council. It will mean that the Audit and Governance Committee will need to consider the debt obligation associated with any significant new business cases which are underpinned by the use of borrowing. This will strengthen the governance arrangements around the robustness of any proposal. The approach to reduce the debt threshold accords with the prudent traditional approach to local government finance. So I so propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Members, do we have a debate on that? Councillor Connolly, then, do you want to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as Vice Chair of the Audit and Governance Committee, I'm very happy to second the proposal to bring the debt threshold back to a more appropriate level and reverse the last administration's move to increase it to £1.3 billion. Increasing the Council's debt to no clear purpose simply does not serve our residents. There wasn't a clear reason to do so then, and there isn't now. I have to say, as a new councillor and as a member of the Audit and Governance Committee, I have been repeatedly taken aback as I learn more and more about the financial decisions of the previous Conservative administration. I mean, what comes before us in committee it can only be described as a litany of poor financial management decisions, which we learn we have to deal with the consequences. We've already heard tonight about raiding reserves, relying on unidentified savings. So much for fiscal prudence. So this particular example I find absolutely staggering. As far as I can tell, the proposal seemed to be to allow for spending on various objectives for which there wasn't any realistic plans to do in the pipeline. The proposal seemed to say, let's raise the credit card limit in case we decide to want to build some housing. We don't, but just in case we did. What I find particularly baffling also is the timing. We've just had over a decade of interest rates being below 1%, but it was in November 2022 when the bank rate had been rising and consensus was that it was going to continue to do so. That's when the previous administration had the bright idea that borrowing was a good idea. I find this particularly galling as a Labour Party councillor who would like nothing more than to increase our spending dramatically on building social housing, along with other much-needed public spending. But as we have to tell our residents, we're simply not in a position to do that. So I just think it's important to be clear with residents who we very much want to help, and that we will seek to make the best of the situation we can, but we should be honest about the challenges ahead, and be clear that we have the last Conservative administration, as well as the Conservative government, to thank for the situation we're in, and for which we all have to suffer the consequences.
Thank you, Councillor Connolly. Right, members, I see no more hands, so can we go to the vote, and can we have a consensus on this recommendation? Agreed? Thank you, members. That's a consensus on item 9. Item 10. Councillor Andrews, I understand that you'll move this recommendation, or the recommendations, and Councillor Phipps is going to second the move.
Correct. I would like to propose the 3 set of changes to the Constitution. These are all set out in the supplemental agenda papers that were circulated, and hopefully members have seen. They are available on modern.gov. I will leave it for Councillor Phipps to second the proposal.
Councillor Phipps, do you wish to speak now?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I'm happy to second and would like to reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
So,
right, Councillor Andrews.
Just to introduce the changes, there are 3 principal changes. The 4th recommendation is a sweeping up one to deal with any typographical or drafting issues. Issue A is the overview, scrutiny, structure and arrangements. The existing arrangements at ONS at BCP with their 4 committees of equal status meeting 5 times a year are shown in diagram 1 to the report on page 11 of the extra papers. These were introduced in May 2022. The new administration have indicated their desire to review these arrangements as a priority, triggering this review. Set out in paragraphs 12 to 15 of the report, page 5, are the headline components of the current arrangements and the intended objectives, consequential, experienced and recommended best practice for cross-cutting issues. Now, the changes are listed, and I can go into them for detail, but I only have a few minutes. But the principal thing to note is that there will be now an ONS board, which will meet 12 times a year, effectively shadowing Cabinet, giving the public and opposition councillors full ability to scrutinise the administration. The other change is the other committee is going to be called Environment and Place, and that will now have, if that committee wants to take on the offer, 2 independent members. So the changes are all set out in Appendix 2 to the report, which is set out on page 6. The other 2 changes to the Constitution, B is salary sacrifice scheme for councillors. This is effectively giving councillors what staff, officers have already, an ability to get some allowance for cycling to work. It is a tweaking of the Constitution to give parity to members, which officers have already got. The 3rd change is item C. This is the change of date, time and venue of council, and this to some extent involves the chair of the council. We did have experiences during COVID, and when sadly the monarch passed away, situations where we had to go ahead with council meetings, even though we didn't want them to happen, and we were basically told to stay away. So this is a tweaking of the Constitution to allow the chair of the council, in consultation with political group leaders, to change the date of the council meeting. So that's it. The 4th recommendation, D, is the sweeping up one to allow any technical formatting changes to be delegated to the officers. So I propose that. It's an improvement to what we've got at the moment. It's probably even better to what we had in 2019. So I so propose. Thank you.
Councillors, does anybody else want to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to ask Councillor Phipps for her speak. Oh, sorry, Councillor Broadhead, of course.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the recommendations from Audit and Governance. I thought it was just worth looking, I'm in particular going to speak around the overview and scrutiny proposals and my thoughts on that. Councillor Salmon raised a really interesting point earlier on that, you know, we are not here for our nefarious reasons. We're all here to try and do the best at a given time. And scrutiny is one of those really thorny issues that it has been difficult to get right. I was fortunate enough to be the chair of the original overview and scrutiny function when this council was formed. And I'm actually really proud of a lot of the work that we did. And there's a really comprehensive report on the next item of the work of overview and scrutiny over this time. We had a big job to do, particularly as a new council was being formed. But the central principle of that of the function was the preference for cabinet scrutiny. And I think we did a good job, and I think it worked very well. It was arduous at times, and there were a lot of meetings, but I think it served its function. There were changes that then happened to overview scrutiny. We've heard from the administration a number of times tonight the criticism of those changes and some kind of version of reality that it was the Tories attempting to erode scrutiny. What actually happened, for those that weren't here, is that we had an independent assessment by the LGA, a corporate peer challenge of all of the different functions in the council. There's a really clear section in that on overview and scrutiny. And it said that the overview and scrutiny function was too focused on cabinet scrutiny. There was a lot of issues from the backbenchers wanted to have more interest in forward scrutiny. And he recommended that we make changes to the scrutiny function. We'd made those changes. And actually, if I have a criticism, is that perhaps we're too quick in making those changes. We had that independent advice. Rather than do a piece of work on it, we listened, we made those changes. What's slightly worrying is that we've also recently had our assurance review from Leslie Seary, and in that assurance review there is still a criticism of the scrutiny function in that it is too focused, even with the changes, on cabinet scrutiny as well. I'm not saying that we shouldn't move back to cabinet-focused scrutiny. I'm not actually saying we should necessarily keep it as it is. But if I can reflect on the criticisms of before of taking that external opinion and too quickly moving to a new solution, I think the new administration should take that on board as well. I think a better course of action would be an external view from people like the Centre for Public Scrutiny to give us, now that we are through the initial stages of BCP, what they think should be the best scrutiny going forward. Because at the moment, we've had 2 external reviews that say don't go back to cabinet-focused scrutiny. That's exactly what we've got here tonight. So I'll be abstaining. I do think there's a better way. I think the best way to do would be invite the experts in, take some time over it, and this time make sure we get it right.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other debate? Leader.
This option allows the Chair of Scrutiny to have the opportunity to scrutinise Cabinet. It doesn't require the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny to scrutinise Cabinet, but the idea that we shouldn't be looking at the vast majority of the work of the Council, which is approved by Cabinet, because that's what the financial regulations allow and require us to do, that it should not be subject or encouraged to be scrutinised is really very worrying. The criticism that was being made about scrutiny wasn't, I don't think, the principles around scrutiny. It was the behaviours in scrutiny. It was the unpleasant interrogation, 17 questions in a row. I remember one particular day where a particular person that became a portfolio holder in the Conservative administration went for nearly 2 hours on me. And I remember early meetings when we were running the council where new councillors were subjected to what can only be described as bullying. It was the most revolting experience where members of the first cabinet of this council were at the point where they didn't want to go to cabinet because of the way they were being treated. It was disgusting. When we then went into opposition and went into scrutiny, we had a fantastic chair of scrutiny. You know, Councillor Bartlett, as an independent chair of scrutiny, was scrupulous in the way that he operated. But still, we had a horrible situation where officers were prevented from answering professional questions, where members would silence officers. And that's why the scrutiny was dysfunctional, because when we asked officers for their professional views on things, they weren't allowed to speak. There's nothing wrong with pre-decision scrutiny. What was wrong is the way that those committees were forced to behave and respond to the behaviours that were happening in the council. What we've committed to is a change in the way that the council behaves, and by enabling scrutiny to take place before cabinet decisions, it enables anybody who is part of the scrutiny process, and in fact anybody who is a cabinet member, and most importantly the members of the public who have a right to come to those meetings, to ask those questions, make those statements and engage with the democratic process, something that they've been denied over the last year or so. I welcome the fact that we had an additional scrutiny committee added by the previous administration, but that was at the expense of the overview and scrutiny. So I look forward to really robust scrutiny, which is led by opposition members and includes everybody and the public. So I welcome this paper, and I regret that we can't actually look forward and we have to keep looking back.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hand.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the key elements is that we do need to have overview as well as scrutiny, but placing the overview and scrutiny just before Cabinet is also an opportunity to discuss things that come before full Council, because many of the papers, as tonight, that as they're going through Cabinet, will then appear in Council very quickly thereafter. So having the sequence of scrutiny followed by Cabinet, followed by Council is actually helpful as well to the important decisions that are made in this chamber by this forum as well. So I welcome the opportunity to enable scrutiny to happen if the Chair of Scrutiny believes it's important for issues that are coming through the decision-making process of the Council. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just really quickly, I really welcome this. The change to overview and scrutiny hopefully is going to give us a bit more transparency, which is something which this new administration has promised us. One part that I really like in this coming forward and may have been slightly overlooked with the way that things are going to be moving and changing is the change of place overview and scrutiny to hopefully environment and place, and that committee being permitted to appoint 2 independent co-opted non-voting members to that. So we'll finally be able to get some members of the public or the local business community into that to give an apolitical view on what we're looking at, which is something as Greens we've been pushing for a while. And I think it's really important to have this climate and sustainability focus from one of the committees as we get closer to our 2030 climate commitments as well. We have been accused in the past of not doing enough on climate, and obviously we had the people welcome us in this evening, who'll probably be glad to hear as well that things have been going on, but this hasn't been surfaced, so this will hopefully give an opportunity to show what we have been doing as a council and what our intentions are as well for the future. So I'm looking forward to the changes and hoping they get voted through this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think now, Councillor Phipps, it's your turn to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. So I am very pleased to second A to D. A lot of the discussion tonight obviously has been about overview and scrutiny, as it would be. And so I'll say a few words on that. I think what the leader has said is extremely relevant as to how overview and scrutiny used to operate at one point. Very relevant indeed. In fact, I do remember that because in the first administration, I believe I was the first councillor to sit in front of the first scrutiny board of this council. And it was not a happy experience, I have to say, not for any of us at the time. Fortunately, I wasn't a new councillor, so I probably took it on the chin or whatever, but there were new councillors that came into this administration or into this council, and they had a very, very bad time of it. And it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. But I think that the leader has said what needed to be said on that. I also think that, like some of you here tonight, were in this council in 2022 when what I still consider to be the dilution and the weakening of the power of the Overview and Scrutiny Board was voted through by the administration at that time. I didn't vote for it, and there are quite a few of us who are here tonight that didn't vote for that either. So I'm just so pleased that we can actually get now a reinstatement of the board with 12 meetings per year. This change is going to strengthen the Overview and Scrutiny function, take it back to how it should be before those detrimental changes were voted through by that administration in May 2020. The ONS board will have overall responsibility for the Overview and Scrutiny function, the oversight, development and reporting, and it's going to be implemented, we hope, if it goes through this evening, on the 29th of September, with their first meeting as a board being in early October. The place committee will be environmental place. It's all going to be a lot more open and transparent, as I see it. We will have a very strong overall scrutiny function, which is very, very important now at this time in particular, with the parlous state of the financial sustainability and governance of this council that we have been left in by the last administration, and we heard about that earlier, and that is evidenced by a government report and our external auditor's report that came through Audit and Governance the other evening, a week ago. So I do support and second all of these motions, including B, the extension to the cycle to work scheme for councillors as well as employees, and C, the minor changes to the chair, and also D. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Andrews, do you want to sum up before we go to the vote?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Broadhead said the May 22 changes were recommended by the Local Government Association. Well, looking back, having 5 meetings for the principal ONS committee were too few. Extra ones had to be commissioned. Councillor Slade talks about how it was even before that, and I am aware of issues that many, particularly the new councillors, experienced when they were scrutinised extensively. I concur with comments of Councillor Hadley, Rigby and Phipps, and what I would say is that if councillors, members of the public, the press, do have a close look at the Grant Thornton report, which was tabled at A&G last week, there are things in there which they have picked up. Future Places is just one, whereby probably, if proper scrutiny had taken place, we wouldn't be in the position of Grant Thornton extensively criticising what has happened and saying this is not quite right. Thank you. So I will propose, as set out in the supplemental papers which have been circulated, those 4 recommendations, A, B, C and D. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Right, now I'm going to go to the vote by a show of hands on this one, because I know we have some abstentions. So, councillors, first of all in favour, please raise your hands. Okay. Thank you, councillors. Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you, that's carried. Right, Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report. Councillor Bartlett, I understand you're going to move the recommendations and Councillor Rigby will second the move. Oh, thank you, Councillor Bartlett, I didn't see you.
Madam Chair and members, I'm pleased to present the Overview and Scrutiny Annual Report on behalf of our Statutory Scrutiny Officer, Lindsay Marshall, who is the author of the report. I would like to compliment and thank Lindsay on the clarity of the report and for the ONS action plan contained within it. The report details the history of overview and scrutiny activities from the inception of BCP Council in 2019 to April 2023. And it also describes how and why the structure and responsibilities of the ONS committees has changed over this period. The report also considers the government and BCP Chief Executive's assurance reviews, along with the government's statutory guidance on overview and scrutiny, to produce an overview and scrutiny plan that would drive changes in the way the Council conducts its business, its culture, and the role that ONS will have in ensuring this change is delivered. Excuse me. There's no need for me to comment further on the past ONS activities detailed in the report, but I should like to comment on a few aspects of the action plan. I'd also just like to comment on Councillor Broadhead's comment that we should have further studies, because we've just had 3 assurance reviews effectively over the last few months. And I can assure you that if we follow the action plan that's contained within this report, that we will be getting it right. I can assure you of that. So, the points I'd like to make. Firstly, ONS is critically important to our democratic process. Our ONS system forms an integral part of our governance system, and it has legal powers to ensure it can act independently of the administration. The independence and legal status are a cornerstone to maintaining democracy within the Council. Secondly, ONS requires independence of thought. ONS will constructively test and challenge the administration as a critical friend, but this can present challenges when members' views differ from those of their political groups. However, members must be resilient and honest by adopting an independent mindset if scrutiny is to be meaningful. And this must be understood and indeed promoted by all political groups. Thirdly, ONS should select topics of community relevance. Where there are so many matters being considered by the administration, it is understandable why ONS can be drawn into focusing on the work of the administration. However, it is important ONS should focus on matters that are of particular relevance to our residents and our communities, and I would encourage members to bring topics of community relevance to the attention of the ONS committees. So in conclusion, ONS meetings puts a public spotlight on the Council. Hence, it is important our behaviours display mutual respect for members and officers, and that our commitment to ONS is reflected in the way that we support and engage in it, be it bringing topics to the committees on behalf of residents, contributing to investigations, or simply behaving in a way that promotes a harmonious, honest and cooperative culture within the Council.
Councillor Bartlett, I'm conscious that you've gone a little over your time, if not a lot over. Can you wind up now?
I certainly can, Madam Chair. And it is this need for us all to take ownership of ONS that is reflected in the report recommendation, which asks members to note the content of the annual report and agree the action plan. Members, I ask you to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Members, can I just say that I am not sticking totally to the 3-minute rule, but I do appreciate that I can let you wind up, but to give you a hint that can we just, all of us, try to keep within our 3 minutes that we have. Otherwise, if everybody spoke for 3 minutes, you can imagine it would be a long meeting. Thank you. Councillor Rigby, are you wishing to second?
Yeah, please, Chair, and I'll just carry on speaking for, I'll say 2.5 minutes, right? And Councillor Bartlett can borrow those 30 seconds from me. No, I'll be really brief. I'm really happy to second this. And I think all I want to note on this is it is the first annual report, and this one's actually covering 4 years. And from this point, we will be having annual reports coming on this. And what I'm more excited about is seeing where we are when the next annual report comes and how it compares to this, and the way which we are working going forward from this point. I think the changes which we've just voted through are really going to contribute towards that. Having had a couple of the place meetings so far, I think the way that we're working cross-party now is really good. We're having additional meetings beforehand so we can really get to grips with what we're going to be talking about and adding as much value as we possibly can do to the items which we are scrutinising and helping to shape policy, which is what we really want to do, and also have that overview. But I also do want to celebrate some of the stuff which we've done in the past, which is noted in this report in the appendix. And it's the things which, when we came together and left the politicising behind, that we really got some good value out of overview and scrutiny, such as when we had the call for evidence for 5G very early on, when we called in South West Rail about Folkestone train station, Wessex Water about the combined sewage overflows. We've had the bids in for Poole and Bournemouth to speak about what their intentions are and how that's going. What else did we do? We've done some really, really good work during the start of COVID in where we could monitoring the response of the council and adding value in that way. So when we do put our heads together, there's some extremely talented people in this room and all on the overview and scrutiny committees and boards. And hopefully from this point, and when we look at this next year, we'll really be able to celebrate having brought a lot of benefit to BCP Council.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Any more comment on that? That was a very long and comprehensive report. Thank you. Members, we vote to accept that, I believe. Is that right? Accept. Thank you. Do we have a consensus for acceptance? Thank you, members. That's agreed. Right. Agenda item 12. It's a notice of motion in accordance with Procedure Rule 10. We've all got the notice on our agenda papers, so I shall ask Councillor Armstrong to move this motion.
Thank you, Chair. But in accordance with Procedure Rule 14.12, I wish to alter my motion by replacing the word November with January in the final bullet point. The reason for this is to allow for a full report to come to Council at the same time as the serious violent crime duty is being adopted, and to take account of the outcomes from the overview and scrutiny panel later this year, and to allow for the completion of the strategic assessment. My seconder is in agreement with that.
Thank you, Councillor. I've noted the change of wording. Is your seconder in favour of that?
Yep, I'm in favour.
Right, can we read that? Yes. So as I understand it, November is going to be changed to January?
January.
Right. Members, can we all agree that amendment prior to looking at the main body of it? I think we have agreement. Thank you. Okay. Councillor, do you want to continue?
I shall continue. Thank you, Chair. This council notes the profound impact on our community of the tragic death of a young man recently in Bournemouth Town Centre, and our concerns grow regarding the increasing number of young people affected by knife and serious violent crime in our area. Knives change lives. They result in young lives lost, lives ruined, families left in devastation, and communities ripped apart. Causes are multifaceted, but they're often rooted in poverty and fostered by adverse childhood experiences. Perpetrators are likely to have been victims of knife crime themselves in the past, and many young people coming into contact with the criminal justice system have experienced previous trauma from their childhood. Many have some level of social learning and communication difficulties, which combined really leaves young people vulnerable to crime and county lines operations. To add to that, the austerity and deep cuts made to young people's services, such as to the Connection Service by national government, has led to a postcode lottery of youth, guidance and support services for young people. This, combined with limited and inconsistent access to good quality PSHE curriculum and guidance at school, has all played a significant part in the lives of young people and their vulnerabilities in relation to violent crime. So although I welcome the Serious Violence Duty Fund provided to all areas, and I look forward to the delivery plan currently being prepared through the Community Safety Partnership, however, I am very concerned that there will not be sufficient resources to meet the needs of our local community.
As a council, we are not always the best placed to make the most effective interventions with young people. So the voluntary sector really do play a very vital role here in engaging young people. And we need to be working better with these organisations to support them to leverage in their additional resources, as they can often access funding that we in the public sector are not able to. So under the serious violent crime duty, we will have a statutory responsibility to adopt a public health approach. This means that we can get to the cause of the cause, and we can subsequently design and implement interventions that are evidence-based. So this evening, together, right now, we must send a very clear and resounding message across our town that knives have no place here.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon, do you wish to second?
Yeah, I'd like to second that, and I waive my right to speak and reserve it in case there's a debate.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. We must remember, members, that it's an ongoing case, so we've got to be very careful not to prejudice any proceedings that may be coming along. I'm going to open it to the floor. Councillor Cooper. Sorry, are you not Councillor Cooper? Yes, all right, sorry, I'm so sorry. Kieran.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Cooper, for letting me go first. I would like to thank Councillor Armstrong for bringing this matter to the Council. This is such an important issue that is not just a key priority for this administration, but I am sure for every single member. And I think it is important to acknowledge that this has been brought forward today because a young man with a future ahead of him lost his life. I want to report that actions are already underway through the BCP Community Safety Partnership and have been for some time, such as the task and finish group you refer to. The multi-agency BCP Community Safety Partnership is currently finalising the serious violence need assessment as required under the serious violence duty. I have seen and read through an initial draft of this work, and it is very thorough and a research piece of work. This would inform the development of the partnership's serious violence strategy for the BCP area using an evidence-based approach. Throughout this process, if we identify that the funding we require attached to this duty is insufficient to properly carry out the duty, then we will work with partners, namely the police, fire service, probation, and the integrated care system, to identify additional resource to carry out this vital work. This may include lobbying the government for the right level of funding, as you rightly suggest. It is really welcoming as well to hear that we have cross-party support for this. I think it's also important to assure you that we already work in partnership with a wide range of voluntary and community sector organisations to deliver early intervention programmes, particularly where we know the need is greatest. But we can always strengthen this, and I think this motion gives us a chance to reflect and ensure we are doing all we can on this. We're committed to working with that sector to lever in, as you pointed out in your opening, an additional funding and resource opportunities that the Council might not otherwise be able to unlock. And also recognising the skills and strength of the voluntary sector better placed to deliver some of our services. For example, as part of our Safer Streets application, we are working with STARS, Bournemouth University and the Students' Union to look at how they can support to keep students safe. The multi-agency BCP Community Safety Partnership has adopted the use of public health approach in all of its work, including to address the serious violent crime, which is one of our 4 priorities. Under the serious violent crime duty, we are also required to undertake a public health approach, and we recognise that we can only achieve our outcomes by working in partnership with a wide range of statutory and non-statutory organisations and communities. An example of this work currently taking place is the multi-agency Young Persons Violent Crime Task and Finish Group, which focuses on the partnership approach to wrapping support around children at risk to prevent them from harm and exploitation. But once again, this motion does an important job of highlighting and reaffirming that commitment. The community safety strategy sits under the BCP Community Safety Partnership, as you probably have gathered so far from what I've said. And as such, this is a multi-agency document and not solely the Council's strategy. The chair of the Community Safety Partnership, Chief Inspector Heather Dixie, will be providing an annual report and update to overview and scrutiny in December. And
Councillor, you're getting well over your 3 minutes. Can you wind up?
Yes, I'm in my last paragraph. Apologies. Yes, not just and all partners, not just the council, are responsible for delivery against this strategy. This is an appropriate forum for partners to provide their updates. So I am grateful for Councillor Armstrong as the proposer for Council allowing this process to be followed for an update to be provided at January's full Council as part of our wider serious violence report, and that we will be seeking support from Council from that. This update will include a comprehensive data set showing currently and previous performance. So I'm happy to support the motion as set out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Cooper now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to bear with me just a minute. As a youth worker for 35 years, and if I was to get you to close your eyes and imagine something, what I would imagine is something that we have lost as an authority and as a council and as a local authority. And it goes right the way back to 2010, and forgive me, is a political statement. Austerity in the policies and the political ideology of the Conservative government have done nothing but attack the welfare and well-being of children, young people and their families in our communities. And we can take youth work as an example. It grew out of the churches and the voluntary sector. And then when they saw the benefit of it in communities, enabling young people to be challenged non-combatively and to grow and to get to know each other in their communities, the government decided, the Albemarle report, let's make it a statutory duty. 4% of the education budget went to building youth centres, training youth workers. And if you notice, youth centres were on the grounds of schools. There was a relationship between state-run schools and state-owned, locally owned youth centres, where young people brought their issues to us by voluntary association. They walked through the door because they wanted to. If they showed oppressive and challenging behaviour, racism, sexism, coming in tooled up, we would challenge them. And we had workers that were trained. I can think of 4 workers in this conurbation, all been laid off. 2 of them are experts in working with young people in knife crime. I welcome this motion. In my life as a youth worker, 7 deaths I've experienced, 7. Each one of them devastating to the community, but we had an infrastructure that we could lean on and we could grow. One example, I won't name the young person or the family, Turlingmore Youth Centre, we had a death. The youth centre was open, we had 45 people turn up to the youth centre. By the end of the evening, we had 125 people, children, young people and their families, grieving for what was going on, coming up with solutions about how we could stop it happening. Where has that all gone? And when we talk about, services, the fragmented, idiosyncratic services that we've got now with a myriad of targets, I've got this target to meet, I've got that target to meet, and paramilitary, they drop into communities, most of them, and enforce their agenda onto the communities they're living in. It's a little bit extreme, but that's the kind of environment we're under. So we have to take this motion seriously and see what can we do to rebirth our responsibility to tackle the ideological economic policies which are destroying our communities. So thank you for the motion. It's such a shame that it has to come to this, doesn't it? Death of a young person. And why? Ask yourselves why. And I'll leave you with that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the leader was next.
Thanks, Peter. I don't really want to follow that because that was really powerful. And as Peter knows my personal commitment to youth work. I run a youth club and I'm privileged that, we are lucky enough that we have a very strong community that is able to take that on without the support of the council, other than in the provision of a building, which we will hopefully be taking on. But it is so powerful that the work that needs to be done to equip our young people with the skills and the tools and the confidence and the self-belief that they don't need to follow the peer pressure or the belief that the only way they can go out safely is to equip themselves with a weapon. I want to keep it really brief because I want to, without going into the detail quite clearly of the case, but I just want to say that I was at the funeral yesterday of this young man, and it wasn't just me at that funeral. The Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner was there too. This is not a political issue right now. This is for everybody. We are all united, whatever our political background or none. It doesn't matter. But what was really moving was that about 3/4 of the people at that funeral were children. They were 16, 17, 18. They were children, and they had lost one of their own. And I heard the most incredible things about not only this young man, but also his friends and his life and what he had ahead of him. And I think that's what we need to keep at the forefront of this. I am really, really pleased with the work that the community safety team are doing. But what I'm really pleased with is the way that over the last few weeks since this happened, everybody concerned, from the police to the council to the community, have embraced and lifted up this family, and we will be working with the family to bring the Knife Angel to Bournemouth in February. But we've also got a conference for young people, Keeping Our Young People Safe conference, which is happening before Christmas. And we're all working really hard to make sure that it has the impact across as many young people as we possibly can. So I really just wanted to say that, you know, yes, there's been a history of cuts to this service, and reality is that we're in a financial situation where we don't know what the future holds for this service. What we do have to do is to recognise that actually there are wonderful communities out there who are able to lift up this service, and with our support, let them help to rebuild this service from within with what the young people actually need. But let's remember that it's not just this young person, it's those 100+ children there who will all be affected and remember this has happened to them. And we owe it to them to make sure that Cameron is the last.
Councillor Trent, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really welcome particularly the input from Councillor Cooper, who has obviously got a lot of past experience in youth services. I think what he said is so right. This is something which has been building up for a long time, and we've been lucky to avoid the worst of it until fairly recently. I'm one of two councillors who, on the Police and Crime panel, are monitoring the Police and Crime Commissioner's position of reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, which is a huge, broad thing, but we're actually looking to ask some questions about youth engagement and engagement with schools and so on, and I'm sort of checking up on some background information on that, because it's very important that we all work together and we work with schools and we work to engage young people. So often I hear people basically sort of trashing the youth and saying, oh, that, you know, they're this, they're that, they're the other. And I'm forever defending them personally, because I really do believe that they've had a raw deal. They've had a raw deal for a while, but they've had a raw deal in particular these last few years. And we do need to focus our attention on supporting young people, and everything in this motion is absolutely spot on, and I really do hope that we work together, and that those of us, doesn't include me, but, you know, on things like the Local Government Association and have an input into their respective political parties, need to push the urgent need to do something about engaging with young people and trying to sort of deal with the situation at source and not react afterwards. And that would be really helpful. We do need some action from at all levels on this, so I welcome the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we now have Councillor Burton and then we wind up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak on this. I'd like to thank Councillor Armstrong very much for bringing this to us. It's the sort of discussion that we really need. It's very highlighted that when we bring this sort of thing to the open, we can address it. If we keep it hidden, it goes unchallenged. I would like to highlight one other thing that councillors could do in this area. We did have, prior to the previous election, a child exploitation working group, which actually started with us talking about the issues with knife crime and developed into other things. It was a total cross-party working group. It looked about other things, knife crime. We had the PPC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, attended it, and relevant BCP officers. The minutes of the working group are not routinely shared with all councillors. However, I'm sure the new chair of Children's Overview and Scrutiny would share them with you if asked. Don't worry, you don't have them yet, by the way. Therefore, they'll be coming to you soon. So I would encourage people to engage in whatever way you can to help prevent this.
Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did submit an amendment to this motion, but my colleague, Councillor Cooper, always tells me that every day is a learning day, and today feels as though it's been one of those. So I am withdrawing my amendment. You wouldn't have seen it because it's been through a process of trying to find consensus. And actually, I think the public would fail to understand arguments about wording. It's more important that we act together, that we act collaboratively to tackle this problem, which is unfortunately becoming endemic in our society. So we have to tackle it. My concern about motions, whether it's this motion or any motion come to that, is that they can become restrictive, that it sets a barrier to what else you can do. And I think it's much more important that we find ways of acting outside, thinking outside of the box, of bringing all of those strands of issues together and ways of tackling them together. Many of us have argued for some time now that cuts have consequences. And where we are now is a situation that illustrates that, in my view. So I'm withdrawing the amendment, but I just wanted to make one final point, if I may, through you, Chair. The serious violent crime duty carries with it some money, which the government gives all local authorities, and that's shared equally between all of the 43 police forces across the country. There is a separate amount of money called Violent Reduction and GRIP funding, which is only given to a fewer number of councils, where government has perceived those councils are in greater need of additional funding. But the reality is that Dorset Police Force need more resources. I recall asking a previous Chief Constable what would make their job easier, apart from money, and they said, no, actually, it's just more money. So it is about trying to find that additional funding, because what it enables you to do is to create a violence reduction unit. And that is a tactic, that is a thing that has been proven to work elsewhere. It has been a significant factor in improving reducing knife crime and violent crime elsewhere in the country. So I'm just asking for that to be taken into account, thanking Councillor Armstrong for her motion, thanking her for the amendment, which I think the timing of which makes perfect sense. So thank you, Chair. Let's take this forward together. Let's work collaboratively and persuade the public that we are listening and that we are trying to support them.
Do you want to speak before the summing up?
No, everybody's much more eloquent than me. I'm very happy to stay quiet for once.
Thank you. So now, Councillor Armstrong, do you want to sum up?
I'm absolutely speechless to be honest. I'm very moved by the fact that as a group that we've been able to find a consensus and that we're able to show how much we're listening to the public and, as Councillor Carnarvon has said, respond in the way that we have to acknowledge the grief and the outpouring of such sorrow that we have in our community at the moment. And I feel really, really quite moved. So I'm ready to, I think I've said enough and everyone else has too.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Members, we need to vote on the motion before us. Are we going to go for consensus on this? Good. I think that's absolutely excellent. Thank you very much, members. So that is accepted by consensus. Agenda item 13 is about the additional ordinary council meeting, 5th of October 2023. I'm going to ask you, councillors, to approve the scheduling of this additional council meeting to take place on Thursday, the 5th of October 2023 at 7 p.m. Are we all agreed? Thank you, councillors. That's accepted. Item 14, we have one question from a councillor this evening, and that's Councillor Trent. So I invite Councillor Trent to put your question.
Thank you. There seems to be a lot of figures being bandied around social media. What is the actual cost to BCP Council of the Bournemouth Air Festival, net of any additional income from the 4-day event? Can this be clarified for us and the wider public? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I believe the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Earl, is to reply.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Trent. I'm aware there has been a considerable amount of misinformation across social media and in the press, peddled by our current and former Conservative colleagues. So would like to take the opportunity to clarify the financial position relating to Bournemouth Air Festival. The events team have worked closely with the Council Finance team to start to calculate the cost of the 2023 Bournemouth Air Festival to the Council. The estimated cost currently calculated includes the direct expenditure and income related to the delivery of the Air Festival, as well as council staff time to support the festival and the net position of income from wider services during the festival, such as from across our seafront and car parking services. It must be emphasised that after an event of the scale of the Air Festival, it takes time to receive final invoices and income from all the activities delivered. Therefore, the current figure is estimated. Currently, the cost to the Council of the 2023 Bournemouth Air Festival is estimated to be, you ready, £480,000. As mentioned, this is a current draft position of the cost. The final position will alter. Over the coming weeks, all costs and incomes linked to the delivery of the Air Festival will be finalised. The Task and Finish group are reviewing the options and for the Air Festival, and a paper will be brought to Cabinet later this year. At this point, we will also be able to provide the final cost of the 2023 Air Festival to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earl, for that very clear answer. I am going to ask you, Councillor Trent, do you have a supplementary? I think you were answered.
Yes, Madam Chairman. It's actually asking for clarification because does the figure, the estimated figure, include the loss of the ultimate cost of the staff that have been transferred from other duties and who will be having overtime or time off in lieu and things like that? Is that actually part of the figures? Because I wasn't quite clear on that part of the answer.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Earl, or send it by email?
Oh no, I'm going to take the opportunity.
I'm happy to provide the information, but want to be clear, this is an estimation. As a council, our expenditure specifically on the Air Festival is approximately £900,000. Our income specifically from the Air Festival is approximately £500,000. We have estimated around £190,000 of staff time is used for the Air Festival, including those in the seafront, events, comms and other teams across the council. We've estimated we bring in £110,000 from car parking and seafront services that we may not bring in to this level if it wasn't for the event. This means the approximate net cost of the Air Festival in its entirety this year is £480,000. I just want to stress again that this is an estimate and the final figures will be published when we have them. I am, though, certain that the net cost to the council and by extension the BCP taxpayer is more than £400,000. This is significantly more than our Conservative colleagues would like residents to believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earle, and thank you, Councillor Trent, for that question. We're on to agenda item 15, the urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. I'm going to ask the Acting Chief Executive to advise members of any urgent decisions.
There have been no urgent decisions taken.
Right, councillors, we've come to the end of our meeting, and I really must thank you so much for sitting in such a hot room. I must confess that we do have a fan behind us here, so we're not... I wasn't going to mention it, but that's why we're not blazing here. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you. The end of the meeting.